I think we're going to continue our book. I had a little crisis before stream. I forgot what chapter we were on. And I realized that I could look at the video, the VOD, and because I marker every all of the chapters, I could quickly find it in the highlight menu. We read through about half the book. We finished with chapter 12. So, let's see. Chapter 13, a parley. I turned again and went on down towards the sea. I found the hot stream broadened out to a shallow, weedy sand in which an abundance of crabs and long-bodied, many-legged creatures started from my footfall. I walked to the very edge of the salt water, and then I felt I was safe. I turned and stared, arms akimbo, at the thick green behind me, into which the steamy ravine cut like a smoking gash. But, as I say, I was too full of excitement and, a true saying, though those who have never known danger may doubt it, too desperate to die. Then it came into my head that there was one chance for me yet. While Moreau and Montgomery and their bestial rabble chased me through the island, might I not go round the beach until I came to their enclosure, make a flank march upon them, in fact, and then, with a rock lugged out of their loosely built wall, perhaps smash in the lock of the smaller door and see what I could find, knife, pistol, or whatnot, to fight them with when they returned. It was, at any rate, something to try. So I turned to the westward and walked along the water's edge. The setting sun flashed his blinding heat into my eyes. The slight Pacific tide was running in with a gentle ripple. Presently, the shore fell away southward, and the sun came round upon my right hand. Then suddenly, far in front of me, I saw first one and then several figures emerging from the bushes. Moreau, with his grey staghound, then Montgomery and two others. At that I stopped. They saw me, and began gesticulating and advancing. I stood watching them approach. The two beastmen came running forward to cut me off from the undergrowth, inland. Montgomery came, running also, but straight towards me. Moreau followed slower with the dog. At last I roused myself from my inaction, and turned seaward, walked straight into the water. The water was very shallow at first. I was 30 yards out before the waves reached to my waist. Dimly, I could see the intertidal creatures darting away from my feet. Intertidal. It's never how I've never used that word, but I like it. It's a good word. "What are you doing, man?" cried Montgomery. I turned, standing waist deep, and stared at them. Montgomery stood panting at the margin of the water. His face was bright red with exertion, his long flaxen hair blown about his head, and his dropping nether lip showed his irregular teeth. Moreau was just coming up, his face pale and firm, and the dog at his hand barked at me. Both men had heavy whips. Farther up the beach stared the beastmen. "What am I doing? I'm going to drown myself," said I. Montgomery and Moreau looked at each other. "Why?" asked Moreau. Because that is better than being tortured by you." "I told you so," said Montgomery, and Moreau said something in a low tone. "What makes you think I shall torture you?" asked Moreau. "What I saw," I said, "and those yonder." "Hush," said Moreau, and he held up his hand. "I will not," said I. "They were men. What are they now? I, at least, will not be like them." I looked past my interlocutors. Interlocutors? Yeah, interlocutors. That's a word. Up the beach, where Emling, Montgomery's attendant, and one of the... I don't think we've known that character's name. That must be the first one that we met, the short one. And one of the white swathed brutes from the boat. Farther up in the shadow of the trees, I saw my little ape man, and behind him some other dim figures. Who are these creatures? Said I, pointing to them and raising my voice more and more that I might reach them. They were men like yourselves, whom you have infected with some bestial taint, men whom you have enslaved and whom you still fear. You who listen, I cried, pointing now to Moreau and shouting past him to the beastmen. You who listen, do you not see these men still fear you, go in dread of you? Why then do you fear them? You are many, for God's sakes, cried Montgomery. Stop that, Prendick. Right, his name was Prendick. Prendick, cried Moreau. They both shouted together, as if to drown my voice, and behind them lowered the staring faces of the beastmen, wondering, their deformed hands hanging down, their shoulders hunched up. They seemed, as I fancied, to be trying to understand me, to remember, I thought, something of their human past. I went on shouting. I scarcely remember what, that Moreau and Montgomery could be killed, that they were not to be feared. That was the burden of what I put into the heads of the beast people. I saw the green-eyed man in the dark rags, who had met me on the evening of my arrival, come out from among the trees, and others followed him to hear me better. At last, for want of breath, I paused. Listen to me for a moment, said the steady voice of Moreau, and then say what you will. Well, said I. He coughed, thought, then shouted. Latin, Prendick, bad Latin, schoolboy Latin, but try to understand. Hae non stunt hominis, sunt animalia qui nos habamus, vivisected. A humanizing process. I will explain. Come ashore. I laughed. A pretty story, said I. They talk, build houses. There are men. It's likely I'll come ashore. Oh, I suppose it's likely I'll come ashore. Probably like that's the sarcastic version. The water just beyond where you stand is deep and full of sharks. That's my way, said I, short and sharp, presently. Wait a minute. He took something out of his pocket that flashed back the sun and dropped the object at his feet. That's a loaded revolver, said he. Montgomery here will do the same. Now we are going up the beach until you are satisfied the distance is safe. Then come and take the revolvers. Not I. You have a third between you. I want you to think things over, Prendick. In the first place, I never asked you to come upon this island. If we vivisected men, we should import men, not beasts. In the next, we had you drugged last night, had we wanted to work you any mischief, and in the next, now, your first panic is over and you can think a little. Is Montgomery here quite up to the character you give him? We have chased you for your good, because this island is full of inimical phenomena. Besides, why should we want to shoot you when you have just offered to drown yourself? Why did you set your people onto me when I was in the hut? Well, we felt sure of catching you and bringing you out of danger. Afterwards, we drew away from the scent for your good. I mused. It seemed just possible, and I remembered something again. But I saw, said I, in the enclosure. That was the puma. Look here, Prendick, said Montgomery. You're a silly ass. Come out of the water and take these revolvers and talk. We can't do anything more than we could do now. I will confess that then, and indeed always, I distrusted it and I dreaded Moreau. But Montgomery was a man I felt I understood, who, only laced your food with sleeping medicine. Go up the beach, said I, after thinking, and added, holding your hands up. Can't do that, said Montgomery, with an explanatory nod over his shoulder. Undignified. Go up to the trees then, said I, as you please. It's a damned silly ceremony, said Montgomery. Both turned and faced the 6 or 7 grotesque creatures who stood there in the sunlight, solid, casting shadows, moving, and yet so incredibly unreal. Montgomery cracked his whip at them, and forthwith, and they all turned and fled helter-skelter into the trees. And when Montgomery and Moreau were at a distance I judged sufficient, I waded ashore and picked up and examined the revolvers. To satisfy myself against the subtlest trickery, I discharged one at a round lump of lava, and had the satisfaction of seeing the stone pulverized and the beach splashed with lead. Still, I hesitated for a moment. "I'll take the risk," said I, at last. With a revolver in each hand, I walked up the beach towards them. "That's better," said Moreau, without affectation. "As it is, you have wasted the best part of my day with your confounded imagination." And with a touch of contempt which humiliated me, he and Montgomery turned and went on in silence before me. The knot of beastmen, still wandering, stood back among the trees. I passed them as serenely as possible. One started to follow me, but retreated again when Montgomery cracked his whip. The rest stood silent, watching. They may once have been animals, but I never before saw an animal trying to think. You, sir, have never had cats. Mind you, most of the time, head empty, no thought. Chapter 14, Dr. Moreau Explains. I do wonder what shall happen in this chapter. And now, Prendick, I will explain. Sorry, that's like the first, 6 words. Jesus Christ. Said Dr. Moreau, as soon as we had eaten and drunk. I must confess that you are the most dictatorial guest I have ever entertained. I warn you that this is the last I shall do to oblige you. The next thing you threaten to commit suicide about, I shan't do, even at some personal inconvenience. I shan't do. Yeah, anyways. He sat in my deck chair, a cigar half consumed in his white, dexterous-looking fingers. The light of the swinging lamp fell on his white hair. He stared through the little window out at the starlight. I sat as far away from him as possible, the table between us and the revolvers to hand. Montgomery was not present. I did not care to be with the two of them in such a little room. You admit that the vivisected human being, as you called it, is, after all, only the puma, said Moreau. He had made me visit that horror in the inner room to assure myself of its inhumanity. It is the puma, I said, still alive, but so cut and mutilated as I pray I may never see living flesh again. Of all vile, never mind that, said Moreau. At least spare me those youthful horrors. Montgomery used to be just the same. You admit that it is the puma. Now be quiet, while I reel off my physiological lecture to you. And forthwith, beginning in the tone of a man supremely bored, but presently warming a little, he explained his work to me. He was very simple and convincing. Now and then there was a touch of sarcasm in his voice. Presently, I found myself hot with shame at our mutual positions. The creatures I had seen were not men, had never been men. They were animals, humanized animals, triumphs of vivisection. You forget all that a skilled vivisector can do with living things, said Moreau. For my own part, I am puzzled why the things I have done here have not been done before. Small efforts, of course, have been made: amputation, tongue cutting, excisions. I cut the thing out of the body. Yeah, Moreau's making furries. Jesus. I disagree. They would be reverse furries. Upside down, for inside out furries, if you will, and sometimes literally. Of course, a squint may be induced or cured by surgery. Then in the case of excisions, excisions. Let's go with excisions. You have all kinds of secondary changes, pigmentary disturbances, modifications of the passions, alterations of the secretion of fatty tissue. I have no doubt you have heard of these things. Of course, said I, but these foul creatures of yours. All in good time, said he, waving his hand at me. I am only beginning. Those are trivial cases of alteration. Surgery can do better things than that. There is building up as well as breaking down and changing. You have heard, perhaps, of a common surgical operation resorted to in cases where the nose has been destroyed. A flap of skin is cut from the forehead, turned down on the nose, and heals in the new position. That's, I believe, from Egyptian. There was a punishment in Egypt long ago where you lost your nose for being a bad boy. And although in that story, they would anesthetize you with 4 strong men to hold you down, cut skin off your cheek and cover your nose gap. Hello, Gray. I shall hydrate, thank you. Thank you. What do you mean, no, Valana? You're not aware of that? Oh, yeah, I learned that somewhere. Don't quote me, of course. Go confirm it yourself before you tell others, unlike myself. That I really don't remember where I picked that up from. Either way, when the nose goes away, some skin can be repositioned over it. This is the kind of grafting in a new position of part of an animal upon itself. Grafting of freshly obtained material from another animal is also possible. The case of teeth, for example. The grafting of skin and bone is done to facilitate healing. The surgeon places in the middle of the wound pieces of skin snipped from another animal, or fragments of bone from a victim freshly killed. Hunter's cockspur, possibly if you have heard of that, flourished on the bull's neck. And the rhinoceros rats of the Algerian Zawavis. Zawavis? The Algerian someplace are also to be thought of. Monsters manufactured by transferring a slip from the tail of an ordinary rat to its snout and allowing it to heal in that position. I think the only grafting that's ever been done on organic beings has got to be plants, eh? Well, I mean, skin transfers. Some of that's possible between different creatures, different organisms, like different people. I know we can do that. We can do things like kidney transferences or transplants rather, stuff like that. Some of this, definitely not done in a hut on an island in the middle of nowhere. Just gonna say. And to completely restructure something into a human, also kind of not gonna happen. We've grown new nose on a forehead before, have we? I mean, that's like, I remember seeing an ear grown on the back of a rat or a mouse or something before. So yeah, we can do some pretty crazy things. Yet again, not on an island in the middle of the Pacific. I'm just gonna say, yeah. And then of course there's like tissue rejection. That's not being addressed here either. At least not yet. Monsters manufactured, said I. Then you mean to tell me? Yes. These creatures you have seen are animals carven and wrought into new shapes. To the study of the plasticity of living forms, my life has been devoted. I have studied for years, gaining in knowledge as I go. I see you look horrified, and yet I am telling you nothing new. It all lay in the surface of practical anatomy years ago, but no one had the temerity to touch it. It is not simply the outward form of an animal which I can change. The physiology, the chemical rhythm of the creature may also be made to undergo an enduring modification, of which vaccination and other methods of inoculation with living or dead matter are examples of that. No doubt be familiar to you. A similar operation is the transfusion of blood, with which subject indeed I began. These are all familiar cases. Less so, and probably far more extensive, were the operations of those medieval practitioners who made dwarfs and beggar cripples show monsters, some vestiges of whose art still remain in the preliminary manipulation of the young mountebank or contortionists. Victor Hugo gives an account of them in La Homme Quirit, but perhaps my meaning grows plain now. You begin to see that it is a possible thing to transplant tissue from one part of an animal to another, or from one animal to another, to alter its chemical reactions and methods of growth, to modify the articulations of its limbs, and indeed to change it in its most intimate structure while it's awake. And yet this extraordinary branch of knowledge has never been sought as an end, and systematically by modern investigators until I took it up. Some such things have been hit upon in the last resort of surgery. Most of the kindred evidence that will recur to your mind has been demonstrated as it were by accident, by tyrants, by criminals, by the breeders of horses and dogs, and by all kinds of untrained, clumsy-handed men working for their own immediate ends. I was the first man to take up this question, armed with antiseptic surgery, and with a really scientific knowledge that's like a real, and with a really scientific knowledge of the laws of growth. Yet one would imagine it must have been practiced in secret before. Such creatures as the Siamese twins, and in the vaults of the Inquisition. No doubt their chief aim was artistic torture, but some, at least, of the inquisitors must have had a touch of scientific curiosity. But, said I, these animals talk. He said that was so, and proceeded to point out that the possibility of vivisection does not stop at a mere physical metamorphosis. A pig may be educated. The mental structure is even less determinate than the bodily. But let me say that again. A pig may be educated. The mental structure is even less determinate than the bodily. In our growing science of hypnotism, we find the promise of a possibility of superseding old inherent instincts by new suggestions, grafting upon or replacing the inherited fixed ideas. Very much indeed of what we call mortal education, he said, is such an artificial modification and perversion of instinct. Pugnacity is trained into courageous self-sacrifice, and suppressed sexuality into religious emotion. And the great difference between man and monkey is in the larynx. The larynx, he continued, in the incapacity to frame delicately different sound symbols by which thought could be sustained. In this I failed to agree with him, but with a certain incivility he declined to notice my objection. He repeated that the thing was so, and continued his account of his work. Larynx. Yeah, it still doesn't help. Larynx. That's what I'm reading there. Larynx. Larynx. Oh, you know what? I've said it this many times. We're gonna go to YouTube. Come on, YouTube. Throw away your algorithm and just give me what I want. Pronunciation. Now give me a quick one. Larynx. So, larynx. So, Larynx. Larynx. Okay. Yay. Larynx. Like, isn't that the great difference between man and monkey is the larynx? I don't know if I agree with that. I laughed at science of hypnotism mostly through because the context from which I expect this story is talking about. Hypnotism is I think more well understood now than when I was a child. When I was a child, It was this fantastical, mystical way of manipulating someone's mind or actions. I mean, what he's meaning is the vocal cords. Yeah, the vocal cords. So he's saying like the biggest difference between man and the monkey with respect to whether they can talk or not, I suppose, is the vocal cords. Sure, but I disagree. There's a few other differences, but yeah, I just wanted to cover that about the so-called science of hypnotism. Fortnite Showdown. Xbox, go away. Nobody cares on my side of the monitor. Yeah. Yes, and he ignored your objection. There you go. I asked him why he had taken the human form as a model. There seemed to me then, and there still seems to me now, a strange wickedness for that choice. He confessed that he had chosen the form by chance. I might just as well have worked to form sheep into llamas and llamas into sheep. I suppose there is something in the human form that appeals to the artistic turn of mind more powerfully than any animal shape can. But I have not confined myself to man-making. Once or twice, he was silent, for a minute perhaps. These years, how have they slipped by? And here I have wasted a day saving your life, and am now wasting an hour explaining myself. But, said I still do not understand. Where is your justification for inflicting all this pain? The only thing that could excuse vivisection to me would be some application. Precisely, said he. But you see, I am differently constituted. We are on different platforms. You are a materialist. I am not a materialist, I began haughtily. In my view, for it is just this question of pain that parts us. So long as visible or audible pain turns you sick, so long as your own pains drive you, so long as pain underlies your propositions about sin, so long, I tell you, you are an animal, thinking a little less obscurely than what an animal feels. This pain, I gave an impatient shrug at the sophistry. Oh, but it is such a little thing. A mind truly open to what science has to teach must see that it is a little thing. It may be that save in this little planet, this speck of cosmic dust, invisible long before the nearest star could be attained, it may be, I say, that nowhere else does this thing called pain occur. But the laws we feel our way towards, why, even on this earth, even among living things, what pain is there? As he spoke, he drew a little penknife from his pocket, opened the smaller blade, and moved his chair so that I could see his thigh. Then, choosing the pace deliberately, he drove the blade into his leg and withdrew it. No doubt, he said, you have seen that before. It does not hurt a pinprick, but what does it show? The capacity for pain is not needed in the muscle, and it is not placed there. Is but little needed in the skin, and only here and there over the thigh is a spot capable of feeling pain. Pain is simply our intrinsic medical advisor to warn us and stimulate us. Not all living flesh is painful, nor is all nerve, not even all sensory nerve. There is no taint of pain, real pain, in the sensations of the optic nerve. If you wound the optic nerve, you merely see flashes of light, or wound the optic nerve, you merely see flashes of light, just as disease of the auditory nerve merely means a humming in our ears. Plants do not feel pain, although there's some science now disputing that, nor the lower animals. The lower animals? It's possible that such animals as the starfish and crayfish do not feel pain at all. Then with men, the more intelligent they become, the more intelligently they will see after their own welfare, and the less they will need the goad to keep them out of danger. I never yet heard of a useless thing that was not ground out of existence by evolution sooner or later. Then you did not study evolution, did you? And pain gets needless. There is a lot of coping in that there paragraph. That I am a religious man, Prendick, as every sane man must be. It may be, I fancy, that I have seen more of the ways of this world's maker than you, for I have sought his laws in my way all my life, while you, I understand, have been collecting butterflies. And I tell you, pleasure and pain have nothing to do with heaven or hell. Pleasure and pain? Bah! What is your theologian's ecstasy but Mahomet's houri in the dark? Mahomet. This store which men and women set on pleasure and pain, Prendick, is the mark of the beast upon them, the mark of the beast from which they came. Pain. Pain and pleasure, they are for us only so long as we wriggle in the dust. You see, I went on with this research just the way it led me. That is, the only way I ever heard of true research going. I asked a question, devised some method of obtaining an answer, and got a fresh question. Was this possible or that possible? You cannot imagine what this means to an investigator, what an intellectual passion grows upon him. You cannot imagine the strange, colorless delight of these intellectual desires. The thing before you is no longer an animal, a fellow creature, but a problem. Sympathetic pain. All I know of it I remember as a thing I used to suffer from years ago. It was one thing I wanted, to find out the extreme limit of plasticity in a living shape. But, said I, the thing is an abomination. To this day, I have never troubled about the ethics of the matter. Maybe you should have, he continued. The study of nature makes a man at last as remorseless as nature. I have gone on, not heeding anything but the question I was pursuing, and the material has dripped into the huts yonder. It is nearly 11 years since we came here, I and Montgomery and 6 Kanakas. I remember the green stillness of the island and the empty ocean about us, as though it was yesterday. The place seemed waiting for me. The stores were landed and the house was built. The Kanakas founded some huts near the ravine. I went to work here upon what I had brought with me. There were some disagreeable things happened at first. I began with a sheep and killed it after a day and a half by a slip of the scalpel. I took another sheep and made a thing of pain and fear and left it bound up to heal. It looked quite human to me when I had finished it, but when I went to it, I was discontented with it. It remembered me, and was terrified beyond imagination. It had no more than the wits of a sheep. The more I looked at it, the clumsier it seemed, until at last I put the monster out of its misery. These animals without courage, these fear-haunted, pain-driven things without a spark of pugnacious energy to face torment, they're no good for man-making. This guy is fucking terrifying. Holy crap. We're going to pause for a little break. We'll be back in 3 minutes to continue our little tale of horror. Okay, we are back. Welcome back from the ads. Where am I? Right. Then I took a gorilla I had, and upon that, working with infinite care and mastering difficulty after difficulty, I made my first man. All week, night and day, I molded him. With him, it was chiefly the brain that needed molding. Much had to be added, much changed. I thought him a fairer specimen of the negroid type when I had finished him, and he lay bandaged, bound, and motionless before me. It was only when his life was assured that I left him and came into this room again and found Montgomery much as you are. He had heard some of the cries as the thing grew human, cries like those that disturbed you so. I didn't take him completely into my confidence at first, and the Kanakras too had realized something of it. They were scared out of their wits by the sight of me. I got Montgomery over to me, in a way, but I and he had the hardest job to prevent the Kanakas deserting. Finally they did, and so we lost the yacht. I spent many days educating the brute, although I had him for 3 or 4 months. I taught him the rudiments of English, gave him ideas of counting, even made the thing read the alphabet. But at that he was slow, though I've met with idiots slower. He began with a clean sheet, mentally, and had no memories left in his mind of what he had been. When his scars were quite healed, and he was no longer anything but painful and stiff, and able to converse a little, I took him yonder and introduced him to the Kanakas as an interesting stowaway. You mean the Kanakas that ran away with your yacht? Okay. I'm a little confused about that. They were horribly afraid of him at first, somehow, which offended me rather, for I was conceited about him. But his ways seemed so mild, and he was so abject, that after a time they received him and took his education in hand. He was quick to learn, for being a slow idiot apparently, very imitative and adaptive, and built himself a hovel rather better, it seemed to me, than their own shanties. There was one among the boys, a bit of a missionary, and he taught the thing to read, or at least to pick out letters, and gave him some rudimentary ideas of morality. But it seems the beast's habits were not all that is desirable. All that is desirable, right? I made this creature that's really stupid, but smarter than the savages. That's, really offensive, actually. I rested from work for some days after this, and it was in a mind to write an account of the whole affair to wake up English philosophy, or physiology. Then I came upon the creature squatting up in a tree and gibbering at 2 of the Kanakas who had been teasing him. I threatened him, told him the inhumanity of such a proceeding aroused his sense of shame, and came home resolved to do better before I took my work back to England. I have been doing better, but somehow the things drift back again. The stubborn beast flesh grows day by day back again. But I mean to do better things still, and I mean to conquer that. This puma. But that's the story. All the Kanaka boys are dead now. One fell overboard of the launch, and one died of a wounded heel that he poisoned in some way with a plant juice. 3 went away in the yacht, and I suppose and hope were drowned. The other one was killed. Well, I have replaced them. Montgomery went on much as you are disposed to do at first, and then... What became of the other one? Said I, sharply. The other Kanaka who was killed. The fact is, after I had made a number of human creatures, I made a thing. He hesitated. Yes, said I. It was killed. I don't understand, said I. Do you mean to say... It killed the Kanaka, yes. It killed several other things that it caught. We chased it for a couple of days. It only got loose by accident. I never meant it to get away. It wasn't finished. It was purely an experiment, like everything else. It was a limbless thing with a horrible face that writhed along the ground in a serpentine fashion. It was immensely strong and in infuriating pain. It lurked in the woods for some days until we hunted it, and then it wriggled into the northern part of the island, and we divided the party to close in upon it. Montgomery insisted upon coming with me. The man had a rifle, and when his body was found, one of the barrels was curved into the shape of an S and very nearly bitten through. Montgomery shot the thing. After that, I stuck to the ideal of humanity, except for little things. He became silent. I sat in silence, watching his face. So for 20 years altogether, counting 9 years in England, I have been going on, and there is still something in everything I do that defeats me, makes me dissatisfied, challenges me to further effort. Sometimes I rise above my level. Sometimes I fall below it, but always I fall short of the things I dream. The human shape I can get now, almost with ease, so that it is lithe and graceful or thick and strong. But often there is trouble with the hands and the claws, painful things that I dare not shape too freely. But it is in the subtle grafting and reshaping one must needs do to the brain that my trouble lies. The intelligence is often oddly low, with unaccountable blank ends, unexpected gaps. Least satisfactory of all is something that I cannot touch. Somewhere, I cannot determine where, in the seat of the emotions, cravings, instincts, desires that harm humanity, a strange hidden reservoir to burst forth suddenly and inundate the whole being of the creature with anger, hate, or fear. These creatures of mine seemed strange and uncanny to you so soon as you began to observe them, but to me, just after I make them, they seem to be indisputably human beings. It's afterwards, as I observe them, that the persuasion fades. First one animal trait, then another, creeps to the surface and stares out at me. But I will conquer yet. Each time I dip a living creature into the bath of burning pain, I say, this time I will burn out all the animal. This time I will make a rational creature of my own. After all, what is 10 years? Men have been 100,000 in the making. He thought darkly, but I am drawing near the fastness, this puma of mine. After a silence, and they revert. As soon as my hand is taken from them, the beast begins to creep back, begins to assert itself again. Another long silence. Then you take the things you make into those dens, said I. They go. I turn them out when I begin to feel the beast in them, and presently they wander there. They all dread this house and me. There is a kind of travesty of humanity over there. Montgomery knows about it, for he interferes in their affairs. He has trained 1 or 2 of them to our service. He's ashamed of it, but I believe he half likes some of those beasts. It's his business, not mine. They only sicken me with a sense of failure. I take no interest in them. Also, you torture them. You force them into a shape they're not meant to be. And when that fails, when you fail, you feel sick and abandon them to the pain that you have inflicted upon them for the rest of their lives. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, sure. I fancy they follow in the lines of the Kanaka missionary marked out, and have a kind of mockery of a rational life, poor beasts. There's something they call the law. Sing hymns about all fine. They build themselves their dens, gather fruit, and pull herbs, marry even. But I can see through it all, see into their very souls, and see there nothing but the souls of beasts, beasts that perish, anger and the lusts to live and gratify themselves. Yet they're odd, complex, like everything else is alive. Or like everything else alive. There is a kind of upward striving in them, part vanity, part waste sexual emotion, part waste curiosity. It only mocks me. I have some hope of this puma. I have worked hard at her head and brain. And now, said he, standing up after a long gap of silence during which we had each pursued our own thoughts, what do you think? Are you in fear of me still? I looked at him, picked up the revolver and shot him in the face. No, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I looked at him and saw but a white-faced, white-haired man with calm eyes, save for his serenity, the touch almost of beauty that resulted from his set tranquility and his magnificent build. He might have passed muster among 100 other comfortable old gentlemen. Then I shivered. By way of answer to his second question, I handed him a revolver with either hand. Keep them, he said, and snatched at a yawn. He stood up, stared at me for a moment, and smiled. You have had 2 eventful days, said he. I should advise some sleep. I'm glad it's all clear. Good night. He thought me over for a moment, then went out by the inner door. I immediately turned the key in the outer one. I sat down again, sat for a time in a kind of stagnant mood, so weary, emotionally, mentally, and physically, that I could not think beyond the point at which he had left me. The black window stared at me like an eye. At last, with an effort, I put out the light and got into the hammock, and very soon I was asleep. Okay, so he's not fusing men and animals. He's just torturing animals into the shape of a human. Then abandoning the tortured creature when it doesn't live up to his expectations. And this is all justified because science? Or also because I don't care about ethics. Yeah. He doesn't care about ethics is kind of the real problem here. This is a great example of why ethics are important, I guess. Chapter 15, Concerning the Beast Folk. Yeah, he's trying to recreate humans, but from animals. I guess back in the day they would call that playing God. I woke early. Moreau's explanation stood before my mind, clear and definite. From the moment of my awakening, I got out of the hammock and went to the door to assure myself that the key was turned. Then I tried the window bar and found it firmly fixed. That these man-like creatures were in truth only bestial monsters, more grotesque travesties of men, filled me with a vague uncertainty of their possibilities, which was far worse than any definite fear. A tapping came at the door, and I heard the glutinous accents of Emling speaking. I pocketed one of the revolvers, keeping one hand upon it, and opened to him. Good morning, sire, he said, bringing in addition to the customary herb breakfast and ill-cooked rabbit. Montgomery followed him. His roving eye caught the position of my arm, and he smiled askew. The puma was resting to heal that day, but Moreau, who was singularly solitary in his habits, did not join us. I talked with Montgomery to clear my ideas of the way in which the beast folk lived. In particular, I was urgent to know how these inhuman monsters were kept from falling upon Moreau and Montgomery and from rending one another. He explained to me that the comparative safety of Moreau and himself was due to the limited mental scope of these monsters. They don't even warrant a quote-unquote creature to the people who do horrific things to them. In spite of their increased intelligence and the tendency of their animal instincts to reawaken, they had certain fixed ideas implanted by Moreau in their minds, which absolutely bounded their imaginations. They were really hypnotized, had been told that certain things were impossible and that certain things were not to be done. And these prohibitions were woven into the texture of their minds beyond any possibility of disobedience or dispute. That's dark in and of itself. Hello and goodbye to free will. Certain matters, however, in which old instinct was at war with Moreau's convenience, were in a less stable condition. A series of propositions called the law, I had already heard them recited, battled in their minds with the deep-seated, ever-rebellious cravings of their animal natures. This law they were ever repeating, I found, and ever breaking. Both Montgomery and Moreau displayed particular solicitude to keep them ignorant of the taste of blood. They feared the inevitable suggestions of that flavor. Montgomery told me that the law, especially among the feline beast people, became oddly weakened about nightfall. That then the animal was at its strongest, that a spirit of adventure sprang up in them at the dusk, when they would dare things they would never seemed to dream about by day. To that I owed my stalking by the leopard man on the night of my arrival. But during these earlier days of my stay, they broke the law only furtively and after dark. In the daylight, there was a general atmosphere of respect for its multifarious prohibitions. And here, perhaps, I may give a few general facts about the island and the beast people. Oh, hello, Queen. Thank you for the hydrate. I shall hydrate now. Remember, if you are bringing a beverage into the library, be very careful not to spill it upon the books. Thank you. The island, which was of irregular outline and lay low upon the wide sea, had a total area, I suppose, of 7 or 8 square miles. It was volcanic in origin, and was now fringed on 3 sides by coral reefs, some fumaroles to the northward, and a hot spring were the only vestiges of forces that had long since originated it. Now and then a faint quiver of earthquake would be sensible, and sometimes the ascent of the spire of smoke would be rendered tumultuous by gusts of steam, but that was all. The population of the island, Montgomery informed me, now numbered rather more than 60 of these strange creations of Moreau's art, not counting the smaller monstrosities which lived in the undergrowth and were without human form. Altogether he had made nearly 120, but many had died, and others, like the writhing, footless thing of which he had told me, had come by violent ends. In answer to my question, Montgomery said that they had actually bore offspring, but that these generally died. When they lived, Moreau took them and stamped the human form upon them. There was no evidence of the inheritance of their acquired human characteristics. The females were less numerous than the males and liable to much furtive persecution in spite of the monogamy the law enjoined. It would be impossible for me to describe these beast people in detail. My eye has had no training in details, and unhappily I cannot sketch. Most striking, perhaps, in their general appearance was the disproportion between the legs of these creatures and the length of their bodies. And yet, so relative is our idea of grace. My eye became habituated to their forms, and at last I even fell in with their persuasion that my own long thighs were ungainly. Another point was the forward carriage of the head and the clumsy and inhuman curvature of the spine. even the ape men. The ape man lacked that inward sinuous curve of the back which makes the human figure so graceful. Most had their shoulders hunched clumsily, and their short forearms hung weakly at their sides. Few of them were conspicuously hairy, at least until the end of my time upon the island. The next most obvious deformity was in their faces, almost all of which were prognathous. Malformed about the ears, with large and protuberant noses, very furry or very bristly hair, and often strangely colored or strangely placed eyes. None could laugh, though the ape man had a chattering titter. Beyond these general characters, their heads had little in common, which preserved the quality of its particular species. The human mark distorted but did not hide the leopard, the ox, or the sow, or other animal or animals, from which the creature had been molded. The voices, too, varied exceedingly. The hands were always malformed, and though some surprised me by their unexpected human appearance, almost all were deficient in the number of the digits, clumsy about the fingernails, and lacking any tactile sensibility. The two most formidable animal men were my leopard man and a creature made of hyena and swine. Larger than these were the three bull creatures who pulled in the boat. Then came the silvery hairy man, who was also the sayer of the law, Emling, and a satyr-like creature of ape and goat. There were three swine men and a swine woman, a mare rhinoceros creature, and several other females whose sources I did not ascertain. How the hell did you get a rhinoceros onto this island? Damn. There were several wolf creatures, a bear bull, and a Saint Bernard man. I have already described the ape man, and there was a particularly hateful and evil-smelling old woman made of vixen and bear, whom I hated from the beginning. She was said to be a passionate votary of the law. Smaller creatures were certain dappled youths and my little sloth creature. But enough of this catalogue. At first, I had a shivering horror of the brutes. Felt all too keenly that they were still brutes, but insensibly I became a little habituated to the idea of them. And moreover, I was affected by Montgomery's attitude towards them. He had been with them so long that he had come to regard them as almost normal human beings. His London days seemed a glorious, impossible past to him. Only once in a year or so did he go to Africa to deal with Moreau's agent, a trader in animals there. He hardly met the finest type of mankind in that seafaring village of Spanish mongrels. The men aboard ship, he told me, seemed at first just as strange to him as the beastmen seemed to me. Unnaturally long in the leg, flat in the face, prominent in the forehead, suspicious, dangerous, and cold-hearted. In fact, he did not like men. His heart had warmed to me, he thought, because he had saved my life. I fancied even then that he had a sneaking kindness for some of these metamorphosized brutes, a vicious sympathy with some of their ways, but that he attempted to veil it from me at first. Emling, the black-faced man, Montgomery's attendant, the first of the beast folk I had encountered, did not live with the others across the island, but in a small kennel at the back of the enclosure. The creature was scarcely so intelligent as the ape man, but far more docile, and the most human-looking of all the beast folk, and Montgomery had trained it to prepare food, and indeed to discharge all the trivial domestic offices that were required. It was a complex trophy of Moreau's horrible skill. A bear, tainted with dog and ox, and one of the most elaborately made of all his creatures. It treated Montgomery with a strange tenderness and devotion. Sometimes he would notice it, pat it, call it half-mocking, half-jocular names, and so make it caper with extraordinary delight. Sometimes he would ill-treat it, especially after he had been at the whiskey, kicking it, beating it, pelting it with stones or lighted fuses. But whether he treated it well or ill, it loved nothing so much as to be near him. I say I became habituated to the beast people, that 1,000 things which had seemed unnatural and repulsive speedily became natural and ordinary to me. I suppose everything in existence takes its color from the average hue of our surroundings. Montgomery and Moreau were too peculiar and individual to keep my general impressions of humanity well defined. I would see one of the clumsy bovine creatures who worked the launch treading heavily through the undergrowth, and find myself trying hard to recall how he differed from some really human yokel trudging home from his mechanical labors. Or I would meet the fox-bear woman's vulpine, shifty face, strangely human in its speculative cunning, and even imagine I had met it before in some city byway. Yet every now and then the beast would flash out upon me beyond doubt or denial. An ugly-looking man, a hunchbacked human, savage to all appearance, squatting in the aperture of one of the dens, would stretch his arms and yawn, showing with startling suddenness scissor-edged incisors and saber-like canines, keen and brilliant as knives. Or in some narrow pathway, glancing with a transitory daring into the eyes of some lithe, white swathed female figure, I would suddenly see, with a spasmodic revulsion, that she had slit-like pupils, or glancing down, note the curving nail with which she held her shapeless wrap about her. It is a curious thing, by the by, for which I am quite unable to account, that these weird creatures, the females, had, in the earlier days of my stay, an instinctive sense of their own repulsive clumsiness, and displayed, in consequence, a more than human regard for the decency and decorum of extensive costume. Chapter 16. How the Beast Folk Taste Blood. My inexperience as a writer betrays me, and I wander from the thread of my story. After I had breakfasted with Montgomery, he took me across the island to see the fumarole and the source of the hot spring into whose scalding waters I had blundered on the previous day. Both of us carried whips and loaded revolvers. While going through a leafy jungle on our road thither, it's a thither, or to hither. I'm going to say thither, but it's thither. Anyways, we heard a rabbit squealing. We stopped and listened, but we heard no more. And presently we went on our way, and the incident dropped out of our minds. Montgomery called my attention to certain little pink animals with long hind legs that went leaping through the undergrowth. He told me they are creatures made of the offspring of the beast people that Moreau had invented. He had fancied they might serve for meat, but a rabbit-like habit of devouring their young had defeated this intention. I had already encountered some of these creatures, once during my moonlight flight from the leopard man, and once during my pursuit by Moreau on the previous day. By chance, one, hoping to avoid us, leapt into the hole caused by the uprooting of a wind-blown tree. Before it could extricate itself, we managed to catch it. It spat like a cat, scratched and kicked vigorously with its hind legs, and made an attempt to bite, but its teeth were too feeble to inflict more than a painless pinch. It seemed to me rather a pretty little creature, and as Montgomery stated that it never destroyed the turf by burrowing, it was very cleanly in its habits. I should imagine it might prove a convenient substitute for the common rabbit in gentlemen's parks. We also saw on our way the trunk of a tree barked in long stripes and splintered deeply. Montgomery called my attention to this. Not to claw bark of trees. That is the law, he said. Right, that's one of the laws. Much some of them care for it. It was after this, I think, that we met the satyr and the ape-man. The satyr was a gleam of classical memory on the part of Moreau, his face ovine in expression like the coarser Hebrew type, his voice a harsh bleat, his nether extremities satanic. He was gnawing the husk of a pod like fruit as he passed us. Both of them saluted Montgomery. "Hail," said they, "to the other with the whip." "There's a third with the whip now," said Montgomery, "so you'd better mind." "Was he not made?" said the ape-man. He said he was made." The satyr man looked curiously at me. "The third with the whip, he that walks weeping into the sea, has a thin white face." "He has a thin long whip," said Montgomery. "Yesterday he bled and wept," said the satyr. "You never bleed or weep. The master does not bleed or weep." "Ollendorfian beggar," said Montgomery. "You'll bleed and weep if you don't look out. He has 5 fingers. He is a 5-man like me," said the ape-man. "Come along, Prendick," said Montgomery, taking my arm, and I went on with him. The satyr and the ape-man stood watching us and making others remark to each other. "He says nothing," said the satyr. "Men have voices." "Yesterday he asked me of things to eat," said the ape-man. He did not know. Then they spoke, inaudible things, and I heard the satyr laughing. It was on our way back that we came upon the dead rabbit. The red body of the wretched little beast was rent to pieces, many of the ribs stripped white, and the backbone indisputably gnawed. At that Montgomery stopped. "Good God," said he, stooping down and picking up some of the crushed vertebrae to examine them more closely. "Good God," he repeated, "what can this mean?" "Some carnivore of yours has remembered his old habits," I said, after a pause. "This backbone has been bitten through." He stood staring, with his face white and his lip pulled askew. "I don't like this," he said slowly. "I saw something of the same kind," said I, "the first day I came here." "The devil you did. What was it?" "A rabbit with his head twisted off. The day you came here. The day I came here, in the undergrowth at the back of the enclosure. When I went out in the evening, the head was completely wrung off." He gave a long, low whistle. "And what is more, I have an idea which of your brutes did the thing. It's only a suspicion, you know. Before I came on the rabbit, I saw one of your monsters drinking in the stream." "Sucking his drink?" "Yes." "Not to suck your drink. That is the law. Much of the brutes care for the law, eh? When Moreau's not about." "It was the brute who chased me." "Of course," said Montgomery. "It's just the way with carnivores. After a kill, they drink. It's the taste of blood, you know. What was the brute like?" he continued. "Would you know him again?" He glanced about us, standing astride over the mess of dead rabbit, his eyes roving among the shadows and screens of greenery, the lurking places and ambuscades of the forest that bounded us in. "The taste of blood," he said again. He took out his revolver, examined the cartridges and in it and replaced it. Then he began to pull at his dropping lip. I think I should know the brute again," I said. "I stunned him. He ought to have a handsome bruise on the forehead of him." But then if we have to prove that he killed the rabbit, said Montgomery, I wish I'd never brought the things here. I should have gone on. But he stayed there, thinking over the mangled rabbit, and in a puzzled-headed way. As it was, I went to such a distance that the rabbit's remains were hidden. Come on, I said. Presently he woke up and came towards me. You see, he said, almost in a whisper, they're all supposed to have a fixed idea against eating anything that runs on land. If some brute has by accident tasted blood. We went on some way in silence. I wonder what can have happened, he said to himself. Then, after a pause again, I did a foolish thing the other day. That servant of mine, I showed him how to skin and cook a rabbit. It's odd. I saw him licking his hands. It never occurred to me. Then, we must put a stop to this. I must tell Moreau. He could think of nothing else on our homeward journey. Moreau took the matter even more seriously than Montgomery, and I need scarcely say that I was affected by their evident consternation. We must make an example, said Moreau. I have no doubt in my own mind that the leopard man was the sinner. But how can we prove it? I wish, Montgomery, you had kept your taste for meat in hand and gone without those exciting novelties. We may find ourselves in a mess yet through it. I was a silly ass, said Montgomery, but the thing's done now, and you said I might have them, you know. We must see to the thing at once, said Moreau. I suppose if anything should turn up, Emling can take care of himself. I'm not so sure of Emling, said Montgomery. I think I ought to know him. In the afternoon, Moreau, Montgomery, myself, and Emling went across the island to the huts in the ravine. We three were armed. Emling carried the little hatchet he used in chopping firewood and some coils of wire. Moreau had a huge cowherd's horn slung over his shoulder. You will see a gathering of the beast people, said Montgomery. It is a pretty sight. Moreau said not a word on the way, but the expression of his heavy, white-fringed face was grimly set. I'm going to sit up a bit. We crossed the ravine down which smoked the stream of hot water, and followed the winding pathway through the cane brakes until we reached a wide area covered over with a thick, powdery yellow substance, which I believed was sulfur. Above the shoulder of a weedy bank, the sea glittered. We came to a kind of shallow natural amphitheater, and here the four of us halted. Then Moreau sounded the horn, and broke the sleeping stillness of the tropical afternoon. He must have had strong lungs. The hooting note rose and rose amidst its echoes to at last an ear-penetrating intensity. Ah, said Moreau, letting the curved instrument fall to his side again. Immediately, there was a crashing through the yellow canes and a sound of voices from the dense green jungle that marked the morass through which I had run on the previous day. Then, at 3 or 4 points on the edge of the sulphurous area, appeared the grotesque forms of the beast people hurrying towards us. I could not help a creeping horror, as I perceived first one, and then another trot out from the trees or reeds and come shambling along over the hot dust. But Moreau and Montgomery stood calmly enough, and, perforce, I stuck beside them. The first to arrive was the satyr, strangely unreal for all that he cast a shadow and tossed the dust with his hooves. After him, from the brake, came a monstrous lout, a thing of horse and rhinoceros, chewing a straw as it came. Then appeared the swine woman and 2 wolf women, and the fox bear witch, with her red eyes in her peaked red face, and then others, all hurrying eagerly. As they came forward, they began to cringe towards Moreau and chant, quite regardless of one another, fragments of the latter half of the litany of the law. His is the hand that wounds. His is the hand that heals, and so forth. As soon as they had approached within a distance of perhaps 30 yards, they halted, and bowing on knees and elbows, began flinging the white dust upon their heads. Imagine the scene, if you can. We 3 blue-clad men, with our misshapen black-faced attendant, standing in a wide expanse of sunlit yellow dust under the blazing blue sky, and surrounded by this circle of crouching and gesticulating monstrosities, some almost human save in their subtle expression and gestures, some like cripples, some so strangely distorted as to resemble nothing but the denizens of our wildest dreams, and beyond, the reed lines of a canebrake in one direction, a dense tangle of palm trees on the other, separating us from the ravine with the huts, and to the north, the hazy horizon of the Pacific Ocean. 62, 63, counted Moreau. There are 4 more. I do not see the leopard man, said I. Presently Moreau sounded the great horn again, and at that sound of it, all the beast people writhed and groveled in the dust. Then, slinking out of the canebrake, stooping near the ground and trying to join the dust-throwing circle behind Moreau's back, came the leopard man. The last of the beast people to arrive was the little ape man. The earlier animals, hot and weary with their groveling, shot vicious glances at him. "Cease," said Moreau in his firm, loud voice, and the beast people sat back upon their hams and rested from their worshipping. "Where is the sayer of the law?" said Moreau, and the hairy grey monster bowed his face in the dust. "Say the words," said Moreau. Forthwith, all in the kneeling assembly, swaying from side to side and dashing up the sulphur with their hands, first the right hand and a puff of dust, and then the left, began once more to chant their strange litany. When they reached "not to eat flesh or fish, that is the law," Moreau held up his lank white hand. "Stop," he cried, and there fell absolute silence upon them all. I think they all knew and dreaded what was coming. I looked round at their strange faces when I saw their wincing attitudes and the furtive dread in their bright eyes. I wondered that I had ever believed them to be men. "That law has been broken," said Moreau. "None escape," from the faceless creature with the silvery hair. "None escape," repeated the kneeling circle of beast people. "Who is he?" cried Moreau, and looked round at their faces, cracking his whip. I fancied the hyena swine looked dejected. So too did the leopard man. Moreau stopped, facing this creature, who cringed towards him with the memory and dread of infinite torment. "Who is he?" repeated Moreau in a voice of thunder. "Evil is he who breaks the law," chanted the sayer of the law. Moreau looked into the eyes of the leopard man and seemed to be dragging the very soul of the creature. "Who breaks the law?" said Moreau, taking his eyes off his victim and turning towards us. It seemed to me there was a touch of exultation in his voice. "Goes back to the house of pain." They all clamored. "Goes back to the house of pain, O master." "Back to the house of pain. Back to the house of pain," gabbled the ape man, as though the idea was sweet to him. "Do you hear?" said Moreau, turning back to the criminal. "My friend, hello?" For the leopard man, released from Moreau's eyes, had risen straight from his knees, and now, with eyes aflame and his huge feline tusks flashing out from under his curling lips, leapt towards his tormentor. I am convinced that only the madness of unendurable fear could have prompted this attack. The whole circle of 80 monsters seemed to rise about us. I drew my revolver. The two figures collided. I saw Moreau reeling back from the leopard man's blow. There was a furious yelling and howling all about us. Everyone was moving rapidly. For a moment, I thought it was a general revolt. The furious face of the leopard man flashed by mine, with Emling close in pursuit. I saw the yellow eyes of the hyena swine blazing with excitement, his attitude as if he were half resolved to attack me. The satyr, too, glared at me over the hyena swine's hunched shoulders. I heard the crack of Moreau's pistol, and saw the pink flash dart across the tumult. The whole crowd seemed to swing round in the direction of the glint of fire, and I too was swung round by the magnetism of the movement. In another second I was running, one of the tumultuous shouting crowd in pursuit of the escaping leopard man. That is all I can tell definitely. I saw the leopard man strike Moreau, and then everything spun about me until I was running headlong. Emling was ahead, close in pursuit of the fugitive. Behind, their tongues already lolling out, ran the wolf-woman in great leaping strides. The swine folk followed, squealing with excitement, and the two bullmen in their swathings of white. Then came Moreau in a cluster of the beast people, his wide-brimmed straw hat blown off, his revolver in hand, and his lank white hair streaming out. The hyena swine ran beside me, keeping pace with me and glancing furtively at me out of his feline eyes. The others came pattering and shouting behind us. The leopard man went bursting his way through the long canes, which sprang back as he passed, and rattled in Emling's face. I guess Emling's pretty damn fast. We others in the rear found a trampled path for us when we reached the break. The chase lay through the break for perhaps a quarter of a mile, and then plunged into a dense thicket, which retarded our movements exceedingly, though we went through it in a crowd together, fronds flicked into our faces, ropey creepers catching us under the chin or gripping our ankles, thorny plants hooking into and tearing cloth and flesh together. He has gone on all fours through this, panted Moreau, now just ahead of me. None escape, said the wolf bear, laughing into my face with the exultation of hunting. We burst out again among the rocks and saw the quarry ahead running lightly on all fours and snarling at us over his shoulder. At that the wolf folk howled with delight. The thing was still clothed, and at a distance its face seemed human, but the carriage of its four limbs was feline, and the furtive droop of its shoulder was distinctly that of a hunted animal. It leapt over some thorny yellow flowering bushes and was hidden. Emling was halfway across the space. Most of us now had lost the first speed of the chase, and had fallen into a longer and steadier stride. I saw as we traversed the open that the pursuit was now spreading from a column into a line. The hyena swine still ran close to me, watching me as it ran, every now and then puckering its muzzle with a snarling laugh. At the edge of the rocks, the leopard man, realizing that he was making for the projecting cape upon which he had stalked me on the night of my arrival, had doubled in the undergrowth. But Montgomery had seen the maneuver and turned him again. So panting, tumbling against rocks, torn by brambles, impeded by ferns and reeds, I helped to pursue the leopard man who had broken the law, and the hyena swine ran laughing savagely by my side. I staggered on, my head reeling and my heart beating against my ribs, tired almost to death, and yet not daring to lose sight of the chase, lest I should be left alone with this horrible companion. I staggered on in spite of infinite fatigue and the dense heat of the tropical afternoon. At last, the fury of the hunt slackened, We had pinned the wretched brute into a corner of the island. Moreau, whip in hand, marshaled us all into an irregular line, and we advanced now slowly, shouting to one another as we advanced and tightened the cordon about our victim. He lurked, noiseless, and invisible in the bushes through which I had run from him during that midnight pursuit. "Steady!" cried Moreau. "Steady!" I don't know why I put a U at the end of that. As the ends of the line crept round the tangle of undergrowth and hemmed the brute in. "Where a rush!" came the voice of Montgomery from beyond the thicket. I was on the slope above the bushes. Montgomery and Moreau beat along the beach beneath. Slowly we pushed in among the fretted network of branches and leaves. The quarry was silent. "Back to the house of pain. The house of pain, the house of pain," yelped the voice of the ape-man some 20 yards to the right. When I heard that, I forgave the poor wretch all the fear he had inspired in me. I heard the twigs snap and the boughs swish aside before the heavy tread of the horse rhinoceros upon my right. Then suddenly a polygon of green. In the half-darkness under luxuriant growth, I saw the creature we were hunting. I halted. He was crouched together into the smallest possible compass, his luminous green eyes turned over his shoulder, regarding me. It may seem a strange contradiction in me. I cannot explain the fact, but now, seeing the creature there in a perfectly animal attitude, with the light gleaming in its eyes, and its imperfectly human face distorted with terror, I realized again the fact of its humanity. In another moment, other of its pursuers would see it, and it would be overpowered and captured, to experience once more the horrible tortures of the enclosure. Abruptly, I slipped out my revolver, aimed between its terror-struck eyes, and fired. As I did so, the hyena swine saw the thing. The hyena swine saw the thing, and flung itself upon it with an eager cry, thrusting thirsty teeth into its neck. All about me, the green masses of the thicket were swaying and cracking as the beast people came rushing together. One face, and then another appeared. "Don't kill it, Prendick," cried Moreau. "Don't kill it." I saw him stooping as he pushed through under the fronds of the big ferns. In another moment, he had beaten off the hyena swine, and with the handle of his whip, and he and Montgomery were keeping away the excited carnivorous beast people, and particularly Emling, from the still quivering body. The hairy gray thing came sniffing at the corpse under my arm. The other animals in the animal ardor jostled me to get a nearer view. "Confound you, Prendick," said Moreau. "I wanted him." "I'm sorry," said I, though I was not. It was the impulse of the moment. I felt sick with exertion and excitement. Turning, I pushed my way out of the crowding beast people and went on alone up the slope towards the higher part of the headland. Under the shouted directions of Moreau, I heard the 3 white-swathed bullmen begin dragging the victim down towards the water. It was easy now for me to be alone. The beast people manifested a quite human curiosity about the dead body and followed it in a thick knot, sniffing and growling at it as the bullmen dragged it down the beach. I went to the headland and watched the bullmen, black against the evening sky, as they carried the weighted dead body out to sea. And like a wave across my mind came the realization of the unspeakable aimlessness of things upon the island. Upon the beach, among the rocks beneath me, were the ape-man, the hyena swine, and several other of the beast people. Standing about Montgomery and Moreau, they were all still intensely excited, and all overflowing with noisy expressions of their loyalty to the law. Yet I felt an absolute assurance in my own mind that the hyena swine was implicated in the rabbit killing. A strange persuasion came upon me that, save for the grossness of the line, the grotesqueness of the forms, I had here before me the whole balance of human life in miniature, the whole interplay of instinct, reason, and fate in its simplest form. The leopard man had happened to go under. That was all the difference. Poor brute. Poor brutes. I began to see the viler aspect of Moreau's cruelty. I had not thought before of the pain and trouble that came to these poor victims after they had passed from Moreau's hands. I had shivered only at the days of actual torment in the enclosure. But now that seemed to me the lesser part. Before, they had been beasts, their instincts fitly adapted to their surroundings, and happy as living things may be. Now they stumbled in the shackles of humanity, lived in a fear that never died, fretted by a law they could not understand. Their mock human existence, begun in an agony, was one long internal struggle, one long dread of Moreau, and for what? It was the wantonness of it that stirred me. All right, we're going to pause here for ads. Jump up, and get down. Oh, holy cow, I've completely ignored chat. House of Pain, jumper. Oh yeah, it really is the House of Pain. Hello, howdy partner. All right. Yeah, we're gonna have ads in a few moments here. We're gonna trigger them now, get them out of the way, and we'll be back to continue this House of Horror, Pain and Horror. Okay, we are back. Oh, let's see. Had Moreau had any intelligible object, I could have sympathized at least a little with him. I'm not so squeamish about pain as that. I could have forgiven him even a little, had his motive been only hate. But he was so irresponsible, so utterly careless. His curiosity, his mad, aimless investigations drove him on, and the things were thrown out to live a year or so, to struggle and blunder and suffer, and at last to die painfully. They were wretched in themselves. The old animal hate moved them to trouble one another. The law held them back from a brief, hot struggle and a decisive end to their natural animosities. Yeah, I'm really kind of like put out by the mutilation and the pain bit. I really can't forgive that part. Yeah, that's like, yeah. That's my biggest problem here. Like making them linger and suffer longer. Yeah, it's part of that, right? That's like a catch-all umbrella for horrible things happening here. In those days, my fear of the beast people went the way of my personal fear for Moreau. I fell indeed into a morbid state, deep and enduring, and alien to fear, which has left permanent scars upon my mind. I must confess that I lost faith in the sanity of the world when I saw it suffering the painful disorder of this island. A blind fate, a vast pitiless mechanism, seemed to cut and shape the fabric of existence, and I, Moreau, by his passion for research, Montgomery, by his passion for drink, I didn't notice that, and beast people, with their instincts and mental restrictions, were torn and crushed ruthlessly, inevitably amid the infinite complexity of its incessant wheels. But this condition did not come all at once. I think indeed that I anticipate a little in speaking of it now. Chapter 17. A Catastrophe. Scarcely 6 weeks passed before I had lost every feeling but dislike and abhorrence for this infamous experiment of Moreau's. My one idea was to get away from these horrible card catchers of my maker's image, back to the sweet and wholesome intercourse of men. My fellow creatures, from whom I was thus separated, began to assume idyllic virtue and beauty in my memory. My first friendship with Montgomery did not increase. His long separation from humanity, his secret vice of drunkenness, his evident sympathy with the beast people tainted him to me. Several times I let him go alone among them. I avoided intercourse with them in every possible way. I spent an increasing proportion of my time upon the beach, looking for some liberating sail that never appeared, until one day there fell upon us an appalling disaster, which put an altogether different aspect upon my strange surroundings. It was about 7 or 8 weeks after my landing, rather more, I think, though I had not troubled to keep account of the time. When this catastrophe occurred, it happened in the early morning, I should think about 6. I had risen and breakfasted early, having been aroused by the noise of 3 beastmen carrying wood into the enclosure. After breakfast, I went to the open gateway of the enclosure and stood there smoking a cigarette and enjoying the freshness of the early morning. Well, that's a contradiction now, isn't it? I'm going out for some fresh air. Start smoking. Moreau presently came round the corner of the enclosure and greeted me. He passed me by, and I heard him behind me unlock and enter his laboratory. So indurated was I at that time to the abomination of the place that I heard, without a touch of emotion, the puma victim begin another day of torture. Wow, he's into weeks of torturing this poor thing. It met its persecutor with a shriek, almost exactly like that of an angry virago. Yes, virago. Then suddenly something happened. I do not know what, to this day. I heard a short, sharp cry behind me, a fall, and turning saw an awful face rushing upon me. Not human, not animal, but hellish, brown, seamed with red branching scars, red drops starting out upon it, and the lidless eyes ablaze. I threw up my arm to defend myself from the blow that flung me headlong with a broken forearm, and the great monster, swathed in lint with red-stained bandages fluttering about it, leapt over me and passed. I rolled over and over down the beach, tried to sit up, and collapsed upon my broken arm. Then Moreau appeared, his massive white face all the more terrible for the blood that trickled from his forehead. He carried a revolver in one hand. He scarcely glanced at me, but rushed off at once in pursuit of the puma. I tried the other arm and sat up. The muffled figure in front ran in great striding leaps upon the beach, and Moreau followed her. She turned her head and saw him, then doubling abruptly made for the bushes. She gained upon him at every stride. What, she gained upon him? I saw her plunge into them, and Moreau, running slantingly to intercept her, fired and missed as she disappeared. Then he too vanished in the green confusion. I stared after them, and then the pain in my arm flamed up, and with a groan I staggered to my feet. Montgomery appeared in the doorway, dressed and with his revolver in his hand. "Great God, Prendick," he said, not noticing that I was hurt. "That brute's loose, tore the fetter out of the wall. Have you seen them?" And sharply, seeing I gripped my arm, "What's the matter?" "I was standing in the doorway," said I. He came forward and took my arm. "Blood on the sleeve," said he, and rolled back the flannel. He pocketed his weapon, felt my arm about painfully, and led me inside. "Your arm is broken," he said, and then, "Tell me exactly how it happened. What happened?" I told him what I had seen, told him in broken sentences with gasps of pain between them, and very dexterously and swiftly he bound my arm. Meanwhile, he slung it from my shoulder, stood back and looked at me. "You'll do," he said. "And now?" he thought. And then he went out and locked the gates of the enclosure. He was absent some time. I was chiefly concerned about my arm. The incident seemed merely one more of many horrible things. I sat down in the deck chair, and I must admit, swore heartily at the island. The first dull feeling of injury in my arm had already given way to a burning pain when Montgomery reappeared. His face was rather pale, and he showed more of his lower gums than ever. "I can neither see nor hear anything of him," he said. "I have been thinking he may want my help." He stared at me with his expressionless eyes. "That was a strong brute," he said. "It simply wrenched its fetter out of the wall." He went to the window, then to the door, and there turned to me. "I shall go after him," he said. "There's another revolver I can leave with you. To tell you the truth, I feel anxious somehow." He obtained the weapon and put it ready into my hand on the table, then went out, leaving a restless contagion in the air. I did not sit long after he left, but took the revolver in hand and went to the doorway. The morning was still as death. Not a whisper of wind was stirring. The sea was like polished glass, the sky empty, the beach desolate. In my half-excited, half-feverish state, this stillness of things oppressed me. I tried to whistle and the tune died away. I swore again, the second time that morning. Then I went to the corner of the enclosure and stared inland at the green bush that had swallowed up Moreau and Montgomery. When would they return, and how? Then, far away, up the beach, a little gray beast man appeared, ran down to the water's edge, and began splashing about. I strolled back to the doorway and then to the corner again, and so began pacing to and fro like a sentinel upon duty. Once I was arrested by the distant voice of Montgomery bawling, "Cooey Moreau." I don't know what that means. My arm became less painful, but very hot. I got feverish and thirsty. My shadow grew shorter. I watched the distant figure until it went away again. Would Moreau and Montgomery never return? 3 seabirds began fighting for some stranded treasure. Then, from far away, behind the enclosure, I heard a pistol shot. A long silence, and then came another. Then a yelling cry near, and another dismal gap of silence. My unfortunate imagination set to work to torment me. Then suddenly a shot close by. I went to the corner, startled, and saw Montgomery, his face scarlet, his hair disordered, and the knee of his trousers torn. His face expressed profound consternation. Behind him slouched the beast man, Emling, and round Emling's jaws were some queer, dark stains. "Has he come?" said Montgomery. "Moreau?" said I. "No." My God. The man was panting, almost sobbing. "Go back in," he said, taking my arm. "They're mad. They're all rushing about mad. What can have happened?" "I don't know. I tell you when my breath comes. Where's some brandy?" The cure-all. Montgomery limped before me into the room and sat down in the deck chair. Emling flung himself down just outside the doorway and began panting like a dog. I got Montgomery some brandy and water. He sat staring in front of him at nothing, recovering his breath. After some minutes, he began to tell me what had happened. He had followed their track for some way. It was plain enough at first on account of the crushed and broken bushes, white rags torn from the puma's bandages, and occasional smears of blood on the leaves of the shrubs and undergrowth. He lost the track, however, on the stony ground beyond the stream where I had seen the beastman drinking, and went wandering aimlessly westward, shouting Moreau's name. Then Emling had come to him carrying a light hatchet. Emling had seen nothing of the puma affair, and had been felling wood. He heard him calling. They went on shouting together. 2 beastmen came crouching and peering at them through the undergrowth with gestures and a furtive carriage that alarmed Montgomery by their strangeness. He hailed them, and they fled guiltily. He stopped shouting after that, and after wandering some time further in an undecided way, determined to visit the huts. He found the ravine deserted. Growing more alarmed every minute, he began to retrace his steps. Then he encountered the 2 swinemen I had seen dancing on the night of my arrival. Blood-stained they were about the mouth and intensely excited. They came crashing through the ferns and stopped with fierce faces when they saw him. He cracked his whip in some trepidation, and forthwith they rushed at him. Never before had a beastman dared to do that. One he shot through the head. Emling flung himself upon the other, and the 2 rolled, grappling. Emling got his brute under and with his teeth in his throat, and Montgomery shot that too as it struggled in Emling's grip. He had some difficulty in inducing Emling to come on with him. Thence they had hurried back to me. On the way, Emling had suddenly rushed into a thicket and driven out an undersized ocelot man, also blood-stained, and lame through a wound in the foot. This brute had run a little way and then turned savagely at the bay, and Montgomery, with a certain wantonness, I wish they'd stop using that word, I thought, had shot him. "What does it all mean?" said I. He shook his head and turned once more to the brandy. There's like 1 or 2 words in this book that my brain is just not wrapping my tongue around. Chapter 18. The Finding of Moreau. When I saw Montgomery swallow a 3rd dose of brandy... Oh, Greybeard, thank you for the hydrate. Here. My throat is getting a little sore tonight. I don't read as often as I should, I suppose. When I saw Montgomery swallow a 3rd dose of brandy, I took it upon myself to interfere. He was already more than half fuddled. I told him that some serious thing must have happened to Moreau by this time, or he would have returned before this, and that it behooved us to ascertain what that catastrophe was. Montgomery raised some feeble objections, and at last agreed. We had some food, and then all 3 of us started. It is possibly due to the tension of my mind at that time, but even now that start into the hot stillness of the tropical afternoon is a singularly vivid impression. Emling went first, his shoulder hunched, his strange black head moving with quick starts as he peered first on this side of the way and then on that. He was unarmed. His axe he had dropped when he encountered the swine man. Teeth were his weapons when it came to fighting. Montgomery followed with stumbling footsteps, his hands in his pockets, his face downcast. He was in a state of muddled sullenness with me on account of the brandy. Childish. My world is falling apart. Fuck you, you didn't let me have a drink. I'm gonna sulk about it. He was in a state of muddled sullenness. Okay. Wrong line. My left arm was in a sling. It was lucky it was my left, and I carried my revolver in my right. Soon we traced a narrow path through the wild luxuriance of the island, going northwestward, and presently Emling stopped and became rigid with watchfulness. Montgomery almost staggered into him and then stopped too. Then, listening intently, we heard coming through the trees the sound of voices and footsteps approaching us. "He is dead," said a deep, vibrating voice. "He is not dead, he is not dead," jabbered another. We saw," said several voices. "Hello?" suddenly shouted Montgomery. "Hello there!" "Confound you," said I, and gripped my pistol. There was a silence and a crashing among the interlacing vegetation, first here, then there, and then half a dozen faces appeared, strange faces, lit by a strange light. Where the hell did the strange light come from? Emling made a growling noise in his throat. I recognized the ape-man. I had indeed already identified his voice and two of the white swath of brown-featured creatures I had seen in Montgomery's boat. With these were the two dappled brutes and that gray, horribly crooked creature who said the law, with gray hair streaming down its cheeks, heavy gray eyebrows, and gray locks pouring off from the central parting of its sloping forehead. A heavy, faceless thing, with strange red eyes looking at us curiously from amidst the green. For a space no one spoke. Then Montgomery hiccoughed. "Who said he was dead?" The monkey man looked guiltily at the gray-haired thing. "He is dead," said this monster. "They saw." There was nothing threatening about this detachment. At any rate, they seemed awe-stricken and puzzled. "Where is he?" said Montgomery. "Beyond," said the great creature, pointed. "Is there a law now?" asked the monkey man. "Is it still to be this and that? Is he dead indeed?" "Is there a law?" repeated the man in white. "Is there a law, thou other with the whip?" "He is dead," said the gray-haired thing, and they all stood watching us. "Prendick," said Montgomery, turning his dull eyes to me. "He's dead, evidently." I had been standing behind him during this colloquy. I began to see how things lay with them. I suddenly stepped in front of Montgomery and lifted up my voice. "Children of the law," I said, "he is not dead." Emling turned his sharp eyes on me. "He has changed his shape. He has changed his body," I went on. "For a time you will not see him. He is there," I pointed upward, "where he can watch you. You cannot see him, but he can see you. Fear the law." I looked at them squarely. They flinched. "He is great. He is good," said the ape-man, peering fearfully upward among the dense trees. "And the other thing?" I demanded. "The thing that bled and ran screaming and sobbing. Is that dead too?" said the gray thing, still regarding me. "That's well," grunted Montgomery. "The other with the whip," began the gray thing. "Well," said I. "Said he was dead." I don't know who said that, sorry. It's just said he was, someone said he was dead. But Montgomery was still sober enough to understand my motive in denying Moreau's death. "He is not dead," he said slowly. "Not dead at all. No more than I am." "Some," said I, "have broken the law. They will die. Some have died. Show us now where his old body lies, the body he cast away because he had no more need of it." "This is the way, man who walked in the sea," said the great thing. Now that's lore building right there. In your population of simple folk who don't know how to think faster than you. Man who walked in the sea. And with these 6 creatures guiding us, we went through the tumult of ferns and creepers and tree stems towards the northwest. Then came a yelling, a crashing among the branches, and a little pink homunculus rushed by us shrieking. Immediately after appeared a monster in headlong pursuit, blood bedabbled, who was amongst us almost before he could stop his career. His career. He was going to be an executive, but oh man, he got caught up. He stopped at middle management just in time. The gray thing leapt aside. Emling, with a snarl, flew at it and was struck aside. Montgomery fired and missed, bowed his head, threw up his arm, and turned to run. I fired, and the thing still came on, fired again, point blank into its ugly face. I saw its features vanish in a flash. Its face was driven in, yet it passed me, gripped Montgomery, and holding him, fell headlong beside him and pulled him sprawling upon itself in its death agony. I found myself alone with Emling, the dead brute, and the prostrate man. Montgomery raised himself slowly and stared in a muddled way at the shattered beast-man beside him. It more than half sobered him. Only half? He scrambled to his feet. Then I saw the gray thing returning cautiously through the trees. "See," said I, pointing to the dead brute. "Is the law not alive? This came of breaking the law." He peered at the body. "He sends the fire that kills," said he, in his deep voice, repeating part of the ritual. The others gathered round and stared for a space. I don't remember the exact wording of the law, but there was some of it, a lot of it, like maybe 30-40% of it, kind of written with the context of Moreau is basically a god. So this is going to fit rather nicely, I suppose. What a coincidence. At last we drew near the westward extremity of the island. We came upon the gnawed and mutilated body of the puma, its shoulder bones smashed by a bullet, and perhaps 20 yards further found at last what we sought. Moreau lay face downward in a trampled space in a cane brake. One hand was almost severed at the wrist, and his silvery hair was dabbled in blood. His head had been battered in by the fetters of the puma. The broken canes beneath him were smeared with blood. His revolver we could not find. Montgomery turned him over, resting at intervals, and with the help of the 7 beast people, for he was a heavy man, we carried Moreau back to the enclosure. The night was darkling. Yeah, darkling, that's what I said. That's what it says. Twice we heard unseen creatures howling and shrieking past our little band, and once the little pink sloth creature appeared and stared at us and vanished again. But we were not attacked again. At the gates of the enclosure, our company of beast people left us, Emling going with the rest. We locked ourselves in, and then took Moreau's mangled body into the yard and laid it upon a pile of brushwood. Then we went into the laboratory and put an end to all we found living there. That makes me happy anyways. Chapter 19, Montgomery's Bank Holiday. When this was accomplished, and we had washed and eaten, Montgomery and I went into my little room and seriously discussed our position for the first time. It was then near midnight. He was almost sober, but greatly disturbed in his mind. He had been strangely under the influence of Moreau's personality. I do not think it had ever occurred to him that Moreau could die. This disaster was the sudden collapse of the habits that had become part of his nature in the 10 or more monotonous years he had spent on the island. What a waste of life. He talked vaguely, answered my questions crookedly, wandered into general questions. "This silly ass of a world," he said. What a muddle it all is. I haven't had any life. I wonder when it's going to begin. 16 years being bullied by nurses and schoolmasters at their own sweet will. 5 in London grinding hard at medicine. Bad food, shabby lodgings, shabby clothes, and shabby vice. A blunder. I didn't know any better. And hustled off to this beastly island. 10 years here. What's it all for, Prendick? Are we bubbles blown by a baby? It was hard to deal with such ravings. The thing we have to think of now, said I, is how to get away from this island. What's the good of getting away? I am an outcast. Where am I to join on? It's all very well for you, Prendick. Poor old Moreau. We can't leave him here to have his bones picked, as it is, and besides, what will become of the decent part of the beast folk? I think you can leave his bones to be picked. I'm fine with that. Well, said I, that will do tomorrow. I've been thinking we might make the brushwood into a pyre and burn his body, and those other things. Then what will happen with the beast folk? I don't know. Suppose those that were made of beasts of prey will make silly asses of themselves sooner or later. We can't massacre the lot, can we? I suppose that's what your humanity would suggest. But they'll change. They're sure to change. He talked thus inconclusively, until at last I felt my temper going. Damnation, he exclaimed at some petulance of mine. Can't you see I'm in a worse hole than you are? He got up and went for the brandy. Drink, he said, returning. You logic-chopping, chalky-faced saint of an atheist. Drink. That's an amazing sentence. Not I, said I, and sat grimly watching his face under the yellow paraffin flare as he drank himself into a garrulous mess. Or misery, sorry. I have a memory of infinite tedium. He wandered into a model in defense of the beast people and of Emling. Emling, he said, was the only thing that had ever really cared for him, and suddenly an idea came to him. I'm damned, said he, staggering to his feet and clutching the brandy bottle. By some flash of intuition, I knew what it was he intended. You don't give drink to that beast, I said, rising and facing him. Beast, said he. You're the beast. He takes his liquor like a Christian. Come out of the way, Prendick. For God's sake, said I. Get out of the way, he roared, and suddenly whipped out his revolver. Very well, said I, and stood aside, half-minded to fall upon him as he put his hand upon the latch, but deterred by the thought of my useless harm. You've made a beast of yourself. To the beasts you may go. He flung the doorway open, and stood half-facing me between the yellow lamplight and the pallid glare of the moon. His eye sockets were blotches of black under his stubbly eyebrows. You're a solemn prig, Prendick. A silly ass. You're always fearing and fancying. We're on the edge of things. I am bound to cut my throat tomorrow. I'm going to have a damn bank holiday tonight. He turned and went out into the moonlight. Emling, he cried. Emling, old friend. 3 dim creatures in the silvery light came along the edge of the wan beach. One, a white-wrapped creature, the other 2, blotches of blackness following it. They halted, staring. Then I saw Emling's hunched shoulders as he came round the corner of the house. Drink, cried Montgomery. Drink, you brutes. Drink and be men. Damn, I'm the cleverest. Moreau forgot this. This is the last touch. Drink, I tell you. And waving the bottle in his hand, he started off at a kind of a quick trot to the westward, Emling ranging himself between him and the 3 dim creatures who followed. I went to the doorway. They were already indistinct in the midst of the moonlight before Montgomery halted. I saw him administer a dose of the raw branding to Emling, and saw the 5 figures melt into one vague patch. "Sing!" I heard Montgomery shout. "Sing all together. Confound old Prendick. That's right. Now again, confound old Prendick." The black group broke up into 5 separate figures and wound slowly away from me along the band of shining beach. Each went howling at his own sweet will, yelping insults at me, or giving whatever other vent this new inspiration of brandy demanded. Presently, I heard Montgomery's voice shouting, "Right turn," and they passed with their shouts and howls into the blackness of the landward trees. Slowly, very slowly, they receded into silence. The peaceful splendor of the night healed again. The moon was now past the meridian and traveling down the west. It was at its full and very bright riding through the empty blue sky. The shadow of the wall lay a yard wide and of inky blackness at my feet. The eastward sea was a featureless gray, dark and mysterious, and between the sea and the shadow the gray sands of volcanic glass and crystals flashed and shone like a beach of diamonds. Behind me the paraffin lamp flared hot and ruddy. Then I shut the door, locked it, and went into the enclosure where Moreau lay beside his latest victims. The stag hounds and the llama and some other wretched beast brutes, with his massive face calm even after his terrible death, and with the hard eyes open, staring at the dead white moon above. I sat down upon the edge of the sink, and with my eyes upon that ghastly pile of silvery light and ominous shadows, began to turn over my plans. In the morning I would gather some provisions in the dinghy, and after setting fire to the pyre before me, push out into the desolation of the high sea once more. I felt that for Montgomery there was no help, that he was, in truth, half akin to these beast folk, unfitted for human kindred. I do not know how long I sat there scheming. It must have been an hour or so. Then my planning was interrupted by the return of Montgomery to my neighborhood. I heard a yelling from many throats, a tumult of exultant cries passing down towards the beach, whooping and howling, and excited shrieks that seemed to come to a stop near the water's edge. The riot rose and fell. I heard heavy blows and the splintering smash of wood, but it did not trouble me then. A discordant chanting began. My thoughts went back to my means of escape. I got up, brought the lamp, and went into a shed to look at some kegs I had seen there. Then I became interested in the contents of some biscuit tins and opened one. I saw something out of the tail of my eye, a red figure, and turned sharply. Behind me lay the yard, vividly black and white in the moonlight, and on the pile of wood and faggots on which Moreau and his mutilated victims lay, one over another. They seemed to be gripping one another in one last revengeful grapple. His wounds gaped, black as night, and the blood that had dripped lay in black patches upon the sand. Then I saw, without understanding the cause of my phantom, a ruddy glow that came and danced and went upon the wall opposite. I misinterpreted this, fancied it was a reflection of my flickering lamp, and turned again to the stores in the shed. I went on rummaging among them, as well as a one-armed man could, finding this convenient thing and that, and putting them aside for tomorrow's launch. My movements were slow, and the time passed quickly. Insensibly the daylight crept upon me. The chanting died down, giving place to a clamor. Then it began again, and suddenly broke into a tumult. I heard cries of "More, more!" a sound like quarreling, and a sudden wild shriek. The quality of the sounds changed so greatly that it arrested my attention. I went out into the yard and listened. Then, cutting like a knife across the confusion, came the crack of a revolver. I rushed at once through my room to the little doorway. As I did so, I heard some of the packing cases behind me go sliding down and smash together with a clatter of glass on the floor of the shed, but I did not heed these. I flung the door open and looked out. Up the beach by the boathouse, a bonfire was burning, raining up sparks into the indistinctness of the dawn. Around this struggled a mass of black figures. I heard Montgomery call my name. I began to run at once towards this fire, a revolver in hand. I saw the pink tongue of Montgomery's pistol lick out once close to the ground. He was down. I shouted with all my strength and fired into the air. I heard someone cry, "The Master!" The knotted black struggle broke into scattering units. The fire leapt and sank down. The crowd of beast people fled in sudden panic before me, up the beach. In my excitement, I fired at their retreating backs. As they disappeared among the bushes, then I turned to the black heaps upon the ground. Montgomery lay on his back, with the hairy gray beast man sprawling across his body. The brute was dead, but still gripping Montgomery's throat with his curved claws. Nearby lay Emling on his face and quite still, his neck bitten open and the upper part of the smashed brandy bottle in his hand. 2 other figures lay near the fire, the one motionless, the other groaning fitfully every now and then, raising its head slowly, then dropping it again. I caught hold of the gray man and pulled him off Montgomery's body. His claws drew down the torn coat reluctantly as I dragged him away. Montgomery was dark in the face and scarcely breathing. I splashed seawater on his face and pillowed his head on my rolled-up coat. Yeah, he got them drunk. Yep. Emling was dead. The wounded creature by the fire, it was a wolf brute with a bearded gray face, lay, I found, with the fore part of its body upon the still glowing timber. The wretched thing was injured so dreadfully that in mercy I blew its brains out at once. The other brute was one of the bullmen swathed in white. He too was dead. The rest of the beast people had vanished from the beach. I went to Montgomery again and knelt beside him, cursing my ignorance of medicine. The fire beside me had sunk down, and only charred beams of timber glowed at the central ends, and mixed with the gray ash of brushwood remained. I wondered casually where Montgomery had got his wood. Then I saw that the dawn was upon us. The sky had grown brighter. The setting moon was becoming pale and opaque in the luminous blue of the day. The sky to the eastward was rimmed with red. Suddenly, I heard a thud and a hissing behind me, and looking around, sprang to my feet with a cry of horror. Against the warm dawn, great tumultuous masses of black smoke were boiling up out of the enclosure, and through their stormy darkness shot flickering threads of blood-red flame. Then the thatched roof caught. I saw the curving charge of the flames across the sloping straw. A spurt of fire jetted from the window of my room. I knew at once what had happened. I remembered the crash I had heard. When I had rushed out to Montgomery's assistance, I had overturned the lamp. The hopelessness of saving any of the contents of the enclosure stared me in the face. My mind came back to my plan of flight and turned swiftly. I looked to see where the 2 boats lay upon the beach. They were gone. 2 axes lay upon the sand beside me. Chips and splinters were scattered broadcast, and the ashes of the bonfire were blackened and smoking under the dawn. Montgomery had burnt the boats to revenge himself upon me and prevent our return to mankind. A sudden convulsion of rage shook me. I was almost moved to batter his foolish head in as he lay there helpless at my feet. Then suddenly his hand moved, so feebly, so pitifully, that my wrath vanished. He groaned, and opened his eyes for a minute. I knelt down beside him and raised his head. He opened his eyes again, staring silently at the dawn, and then they met mine. The lids fell. "Sorry," he said presently, with an effort. He seemed trying to think. "The last," he murmured. "The last of this silly universe. What a mess." I listened. His head fell helplessly to one side. I thought some drink might revive him, but there was neither drink nor vessel in which to bring drink at hand. He seemed suddenly heavier. My heart went cold. I bent down to his face and put my hand through the rent of his blouse. He was dead. And even as he died, a line of white heat, the limb of the sun, rose eastward beyond the projection of the bay, splashing its radiance across the sky and turning the dark sea into a weltering tumult of dazzling light. It fell like a glory upon his death-shrunken face. I let his head fall gently upon the rough pillow I had made for him, and stood up. Before me was the glittering desolation of the sea, the awful solitude upon which I had already suffered so much. Behind me the island hushed under the dawn, its beast people silent and unseen. The enclosure with all its provisions and ammunition burned noisily, with sudden gusts of flame and a fitful crackling, and now and then a crash. The heavy smoke drove up the beach away from me, rolling low over the distant treetops towards the huts in the ravine. Beside me were the charred vestiges of the boats and these 5 dead bodies. Then out of the bushes came 3 beast people, with hunched shoulders, protruding heads, misshapen hands awkwardly held, and inquisitive, unfriendly eyes, and advanced towards me with hesitating gestures. Dun dun dun. It's my sound effects for the night. Chapter 20. Alone with the Beast Folk. I faced these people, facing my fate in them, single-handed now, literally single-handed, for I had a broken arm. In my pocket was a revolver with 2 empty chambers. Among the chips scattered about the beach lay 2 axes that had been used to chop up the boats. The tide was creeping in behind me. There was nothing for it but courage. I looked squarely into the faces of the advancing monsters. They avoided my eyes, and their quivering nostrils investigated the bodies that lay beyond me on the beach. I took a 6 steps, picked up the blood-stained whip that lay beneath the body of the wolfman and cracked it. They stopped and stared at me. "Salute," I said. "Bow down." They hesitated. One bent his knees. I repeated my command with my heart in my mouth and advanced upon them. One knelt, then the other 2. I turned and walked towards the dead bodies, keeping my face towards the 3 kneeling beastmen, very much as an actor passing up the stage faces the audience. "They broke the law," said I, putting my foot on the sayer of the law. "They have been slain. Even the sayer of the law, even the other with the whip. Great is the law. Come and see." "None escape," said one of them, advancing and peering. "None escape," said I. "Therefore hear and do as I command." They stood up, looking questioningly at one another. "Stand there," said I. I picked up the hatches and swung them by the heads of the sling of my arm, turned Montgomery over, picked up his revolver, still loaded in 2 chambers, and bent down to rummage. Found a 6 cartridges in his pocket. "Take him," said I, standing up again and pointing with the whip. "Take him and carry him out and cast him into the sea." They came forward, evidently still afraid of Montgomery, but still more afraid of my cracking red whiplash. And after some fumbling and hesitation, some whip cracking and shouting, they lifted him gingerly, carried him down to the beach, and went splashing into the dazzling welter of the sea. On, said I. On, carry him far. They went in up to their armpits and stood regarding me. Let go, said I, and the body of Montgomery vanished with a splash. Something seemed to tighten across my chest. Good, said I, with a break in my voice, and they came back, hurrying and fearful to the margin of the water, leaving long wakes of black in the silver. At the water's edge they stopped, turned, and glaring into the sea as though they presently expected Montgomery to arise therefrom and exact vengeance. Now these, said I, pointing to the other bodies. They took care not to approach the place where they had thrown Montgomery into the water, but instead carried the 4 dead beast people slantingly along the beach for perhaps 100 yards before they waded out and cast them away. As I watched them disposing of the mangled remains of Emling, I heard a light footfall behind me, and turning quickly, saw the big hyena swine perhaps a dozen yards away. His head was bent down. His bright eyes were fixed upon me, his stumpy hands clenched and held close by his side. He stopped in this crouching attitude when I turned, his eyes a little averted. For a moment, we stood eye to eye. I dropped the whip and snatched at the pistol in my pocket, for I meant to kill this brute, the most formidable of any left now upon the island, at the first excuse. It may seem treacherous, but so I was resolved. I was far more afraid of him than any other 2 of the beast folk. His continued life was, I knew, a threat against mine. I was perhaps a dozen seconds collecting myself, and then I cried, "Salute, bow down." His teeth flashed upon me in a snarl. Who are you that I should... Perhaps a little too spasmodically, I drew my revolver, aimed quickly and fired. I heard him yelp, saw him run sideways and turn, knew I had missed, and clicked back the cock with my thumb for the next shot. He was already running headlong, jumping from side to side, and I dared not risk another miss. Every now and then he looked back at me over his shoulder. He went slanting along the beach and vanished beneath the driving masses of dense smoke that were still pouring out from the burning enclosure. For some time I stood staring after him. I turned to my 3 obedient beast folk again and signaled them to drop the body they still carried. Then I went back to the place by the fire where the bodies had fallen and kicked the sand until all the brown bloodstains were absorbed and hidden. I dismissed my 3 serfs with a wave of the hand and went up the beach into the thickets, carrying my pistol in my hand, my whip thrust with the hatchets in the sling of my arm. I was anxious to be alone, to think out the position in which I was now placed. A dreadful thing that I was only beginning to realize was that over all this island there was now no safe place where I could be alone and secure to rest or sleep. I had recovered strength amazingly since my landing, but I was still inclined to be nervous and to break down under any great stress. I felt that I ought to cross the island and establish myself with the beast people, and make myself secure in their confidence, but my heart failed me. I went back to the beach, and turning eastward past the burning enclosure, made for a point where a shallow spit of coral sand ran out towards the reef. Here I could sit down and think, my back to the sea and my face against any surprise. And there I sat, chin on knees, the sun beating down upon my head and unspeakable dread in my mind, plotting how I could live on against the hour of my rescue, if rescue ever came. I tried to review the whole situation as calmly as I could, but it was difficult to clear the thing of emotion. I began turning over in my mind the reason of Montgomery's despair. They will change, he said. They are sure to change, and Moreau... What was it that Moreau had said? The stubborn beast flesh grows day by day back again. and I came round to the hyena swine. I felt sure that if I did not kill that brute, he would kill me. The sayer of the law was dead. Worse luck. They knew now that we of the whips could be killed even as they themselves were killed. They were peering at me already out of the green masses of ferns and palms over yonder, watching until I came within their spring. They were plotting against me? What was the hyena swine telling them? My imagination was running away with me into a morass of unsubstantial fears. My thoughts were disturbed by a crying of seabirds hurrying towards some black object that had been stranded by the waves on the beach near the enclosure. I knew what that object was, but I had not the heart to go back and drive them off. I began walking along the beach in the opposite direction, designing to come round the eastward corner of the island and so approach the ravine of huts without traversing the possible ambuscades of the thickets. Perhaps half a mile along the beach, I became aware of one of my 3 beastfolk advancing out of the landward bushes towards me. I was now so nervous with my own imaginings that I immediately drew my revolver. Even the proprietary gestures of the creature failed to disarm me. He hesitated as he approached. "Go away," I cried. There was something very suggestive of a dog in the cringing attitude of the creature. It retreated a little way, very like a dog being sent home, and stopped, looking at me imploringly with canine brown eyes. "Go away," said I. "Do not come near me." "May I not come near you?" it said. "No, go away," I insisted, and snapped my whip. Then putting my whip in my teeth, I stooped for a stone, and with that threat drove the creature away. So, in solitude, I came round by the ravine of the beast people. And so you're going to their home after, like shooing one of them off? That doesn't make any sense to me. You're an idiot. So in solitude, I came round by the ravine of the beast people, and hiding among the weeds and reeds that separated this crevice from the sea, I watched such of them as appeared, trying to judge from their gestures and appearance how the death of Moreau and Montgomery and the destruction of the House of Pain had affected them. What do you mean? I mean, he is? Yeah, he is, yeah. Yeah. I now know the folly of my cowardice. Had I kept up my courage to the level of the dawn, had I not allowed it to ebb away in solitary thought, I might have grasped the vacant scepter of Moreau and ruled over the beast people. As it was, I lost the opportunity and sank to the position of a mere leader among my fellows. Oh, he's an idiot? A tidiot, yes. He is a tidiot. Yes, exactly. Towards noon, certain of them came and squatted, basking in the hot sand. The imperious voices of hunger and thirst prevailed over my dread. I came out of the bushes and, revolver in hand, walked down towards these seated figures. One, a wolf woman, turned her head and stared at me, and then the others. None attempted to rise or salute me. I felt too faint and weary to insist, and I let the moment pass. "I want food," said I, almost apologetically, and drawing near. "There is food in the huts," said an ox-boar man, drowsily and looking away from me. I passed them, and went down into the shadow and odors of the almost deserted ravine. In an empty hut, I feasted on some speckled and half-decayed fruit, and then after I had propped some branches and sticks about the opening, I placed myself with my face towards it and my hand upon my revolver. The exhaustion of the last 30 hours claimed its own, and I fell into a light slumber, hoping that the flimsy barricade I had erected would cause sufficient noise in its removal to save me from surprise. And yet, we have ads. I'll just get into the end of the chapter there. We're going to do our 3-minute break, and we'll come back. And it won't let me run 3 minutes now because we are within 60 seconds, I guess. So we have like half a minute there. It's been a long time since we've seen the ads incoming banner. We know this character. We know Prendick will make it back alive. He's telling the story. He's writing it down from England or London or something. So this is not a surprise that he survives. It's a problem with some of these stories. They often do this. Here's the story I'm telling of my adventure from a while ago, which I almost died. Guess what happens? I live. I survive. I promise. Did you see it coming? Who knows? And we have ads. The noise of Sidoen's mouth pleases me. It's quite the compliment, really. I spelled my name wrong. Sidoen. Oh, I'm actually quite tired. Alright, where were we? We have like 1 or 2 chapters to go too, so. Chapter 21, The Reversion of the Beast Folk. In this way, I became one among the beast people in the island of Dr. Moreau. When I awoke, it was dark about me. My arm ached in its bandages. I sat up, wondering at first where I might be. I heard coarse voices talking outside, then I saw that my barricade had gone, and that the opening of the hut stood clear. My revolver was still in my hand. I heard something breathing, saw something crouched together close beside me. I held my breath, trying to see what it was. I began to move slowly, interminably. Then something soft and warm and moist passed across my hand. All my muscles contracted. I snatched my hand away. A cry of alarm began and was stifled in my throat. Then I just realized what had happened sufficiently to stay my fingers on the revolver. "Who is that?" I said in a hoarse whisper, the revolver still pointed. "I, Master. Who are you?" "They say there is no master now, but I know. I carried the bodies into the sea, a walker in the sea, the bodies of those you slew. I am your slave, Master." "Are you the one I met on the beach?" I asked. "The same, Master." The thing was evidently faithful enough, for it might have fallen upon me as I slept. "It is well," I said, extending my hand for another licking kiss. I began to realize what its presence meant, and the tide of my courage flowed. "Where are the others?" I asked. "They are mad. They are fools," said the dog man. "Even now they talk together beyond there. They say, 'The master is dead. The other with the whip is dead. That other who walked in the sea is as we are. We have no master, no whips, no house of pain anymore. There is an end. We love the law, and we will keep it. But there is no pain, no master, no whips forever again.' So they say. But I know, Master, I know." I felt in the darkness and patted the dog man's head. "It is well," I said again. "Presently you will slay them all," said the dog man. "Presently," I answered, "I will slay them all. After certain days and certain things have come to pass. Every one of them save those you spare. Every one of them shall be slain. What the master wishes to kill, the master kills," said the dog man with a certain satisfaction in his voice. He's a hunting dog, I guess. "And that their sins may grow," I said. "Let them live in their folly until their time is ripe. Let them not know that I am the master." "The master's will is sweet," said the dog man with the ready tact of his canine blood. "But one has sinned," said I. "Him I will kill whenever I may meet him." When I say to you, that is he, see that you fall upon him. And now I will go to the men and women who are assembled together." For a moment, the opening of the hut was blackened by the exit of the dog man. Then I followed and stood up, almost in the exact spot where I had been when I had heard Moreau and his staghound pursuing me. Isn't it interesting that Moreau decided to keep a staghound without vivisecting him into a human? I didn't think about that before. Why wouldn't he take the staghound, and vivisect him into a human? I am pretty sure the implication here is it's actually still a dog. But now it was night, and all the miasmic ravine about me was black, and beyond, instead of a green sunlit slope, I saw a red fire, before which hunched, grotesque figures moved to and fro. Farther were the thick trees, a bank of darkness, fringed above with the black lace of the upper branches. The moon was just riding up on the edge of the ravine, and like a bar across its face drove the spire of vapor that was forever streaming from the fumaroles of the island. "Walk by me," said I, nerving myself, and side by side we walked down the narrow way, taking little heed of the dim things that peered at us out of the huts. None about the fire attempted to salute me. Most of them disregarded me ostentatiously. I looked round for the hyena swine, but he was not there. Altogether, perhaps 20 of the beast folk squatted, staring into the fire or talking to one another. "He is dead. He is dead. The master is dead," said the voice of the ape-man. To the right of me, "The house of pain. There is no house of pain." "He is not dead," said I in a loud voice. "Even now he watches us." This startled them. 20 pairs of eyes regarded me. "The house of pain is gone," said I. "It will come again. The master you cannot see. Even now he listens among you." "True, true," said the dog man. They were staggered at my assurance. An animal may be ferocious and cunning enough, but it takes a real man to tell a lie. "The man with the bandaged arm speaks a strange thing," said one of the beast folk. "I tell you it is so," I said. "The master in the house of pain will come again. Woe be to him who breaks the law." They looked curiously at one another. With an affectation of indifference, I began to chop idly at the ground in front of me with my hatchet. They looked. I noticed at the deep cuts I made in the turf. Then the satyr raised a doubt. I answered him. Then one of the dappled things objected, and an animated discussion sprang up round the fire. Every moment I began to feel more convinced of my present security. I talked now without the catching in my breath, due to the intensity of my excitement that had troubled me at first. In the course of about an hour, I had really convinced several of the beast folk of the truth of my assertions, and talked most of the others into a dubious state. I kept a sharp eye for my enemy, the hyena swine, but he never appeared. Every now and then a suspicious movement would startle me, but my confidence grew rapidly. It's just like Moreau was confident too, I might just add. Then as the moon crept down from the zenith, one by one the listeners began to yawn, showing the oddest teeth in the light of the sinking fire. And first one, and then another retired towards the dens in the ravine, and I, dreading the silence and the darkness, went with them, knowing I was safer with several of them than with one alone. In this manner began the longer part of my sojourn upon this island of Dr. Moreau. But from that night until the end came, there was but one thing happened to tell save a series of innumerable small, unpleasant details and the fretting of an incessant uneasiness. So that I prefer to make no chronicle for that gap of time, to tell only one cardinal incident of the 10 months I spent as an inmate of these half-humanized brutes. There is much that sticks in my memory that I could write. Things that I would cheerfully give my right hand to forget, but they do not help the telling of the story. In the retrospect, it is strange to remember how soon I fell in with these monsters' ways and gained my confidence again. I had my quarrels with them, of course, and could show some of their teeth marks still, but they soon gained a wholesome respect for my trick of throwing stones and for the bite of my hatchet. And my Saint Bernard man's loyalty was of infinite service to me. I found their simple scale of honor was based mainly on the capacity for inflicting trenchant wounds. Indeed, I may say, without vanity, I hope, that I held something like preeminence among them. One or two whom, in a rare access of high spirits, I had scarred rather badly, bore me a grudge, but it vented itself chiefly behind my back, and at a safe distance from my missiles and grimaces. The hyena swine avoided me, and I was always on the alert for him. My inseparable dogman hated and dreaded him intensely. I really believed that was the foot of the brute's attachment to me. It was soon evident to me that the former monster had tasted blood and gone the way of the leopard man. He formed a lair somewhere in the forest and became solitary. Once I tried to induce the beast folk to hunt him, but I lacked the authority to make them cooperate for one end. Again and again I tried to approach his den and come upon him unaware, but always he was too acute for me, and saw or winded me and got away. Oops, I did not hit the mute button in time. Sorry about that. He too made every forest pathway dangerous to me and my ally with his lurking ambuscades. The dog man scarcely dared to leave my side. In the first month or so, the beast folk, compared with their latter condition, were human enough. For one or two, besides my canine friend, I even conceived a friendly tolerance. The little pink sloth creature displayed an odd affection for me and took to following me about. The monkey man bored me, however. He assumed, on the strength of his 5 digits, that he was my equal, and was forever jabbering at me. Jabbering the most errant nonsense. One thing about him entertained me a little. He had a fantastic trick of coining new words. He had an idea, I believe, that to gabble about names that meant nothing was the proper use of speech, like teenagers. He called it big thinks to distinguish it from little thinks, the sane, everyday interests of life. If ever I made a remark he did not understand, he would praise it very much, ask me to say it again, learnt it by heart, and go off repeating it with a word wrong here or there to all the milder of the beast people. He thought nothing of what was plain and comprehensible. I invented some very curious big thinks for his especial use. I think now that he was the silliest creature I ever met. He had developed in the most wonderful way the distinctive silliness of man, without losing one jot of the natural folly of a monkey. This, I say, was in the earlier weeks of my solitude among these brutes. During that time they respected the usage established by the law, and behaved with general decorum. Once I found another rabbit torn to pieces by the hyena swine, I am assured, but that was all. It was about May when I first distinctly perceived a growing difference in their speech and carriage, a growing coarseness of articulation, a growing disinclination to talk. My monkey man's jabber multiplied in volume but grew less and less comprehensible. More and more simian. Some of the others seemed altogether slipping their hold upon speech, though they still understood what I said to them at that time. Can you imagine language, once clear-cut and exact, softening and guttering, losing shape and import, becoming mere lumps of sound again? And they walked erect with increasing difficulty. Though they evidently felt ashamed of themselves, every now and then I would come upon one or another running on toes and fingertips, and quite unable to recover the vertical attitude. They held things more clumsily, drinking by suction, feeding by gnawing, grew commoner every day. I realized more keenly than ever what Moreau had told me about the stubborn beast flesh. They were reverting, and reverting very rapidly. Some of them, the pioneers in this... Oh, I have a kitty cat slinking across the floor. Gwen. Oh, good girls. They're nose booping. Hi, kittens. Hi, babies. Good girls. It is 9:12. I assume they have just been fed. I get a visit now and then. Right. Back to island creatures. They have, yes. Right. Some of them, pioneers in this, I noticed with some surprise, were all females, began to disregard the injunction of decency, and deliberately for the most part. Others even attempted public outrages upon the institution of monogamy. The tradition of the law was clearly losing its force. I cannot pursue this disagreeable subject. Hello, Sage. What does AICFAK mean? Are you broken? Sage, did you lose your ability to communicate just as these beastmen AI candy? What? I am so confused. Eye candy. Someone help me. Okay, Sage has lost his mind. Sage, just relax. Take a deep breath. It'll be okay. Just calm down. Remember the law. Yes. Drink out of a glass. Don't suck it out of a pond. Yes. You think that's an emote not showing up? That would make a lot of sense. Yes. Why wouldn't that show up? I'm pretty sure emotes show up in OBS stuff. Is it like, where's my, over here. Sage. No, it doesn't show up in there either. What about here? Yeah, I'm wondering if it's on non-Twitch. No, it doesn't show up either in like just the browser. Hello, Odyssey. I have like what is it? Better Twitch TV. I think that should have all of them. Oh, it's from a Twitch sub when you're on mobile. Well, then who, like, it's anyone's business. It's anyone's guess how that's going to work out then, for sure. For sure. You're losing your mind, Arashi. You couldn't beat Requiem in insanity for better personal best. That's tragic. That's Requiem. Oh, that's, yeah, that's a Resident Evil one, right? Is that the new one? Is that like 9 or something? Or is that before then? Have you considered appreciating the challenges that you have accomplished? I think they updated the game. They cheated it. Grace sections got hurt. Yeah, 9. Rose Denom. Okay, yeah, that's, I see those ones. Yabbering. If I click on it, it gets bigger. Yeah. Nom. Cute. I'm sure. Oh, thank you for the 5 stream streak, Sage. As they say, please streak responsibly. You know what? I can see that one. Why is that one visible? That's the AI. So AIC must be the prefix. Threat. Looks like ban Sage for using a gun in an emote. That'd be great. No, point guns at me. Especially ones that are literally bang-banging. What the hell is wrong with you? That's a dangerous firearm. You could hurt pixels. Go scattering across the island. I'm surprised the kitty cat hasn't jumped up in front of me. Is that what it's like? Wow, Sage. Rude. Oh, man. You need to play more games with me on my game nights. Yes. Everyone does. I'm playing a game. Why would you do that? You said ban you? You're shooting me. Oh, Zartes. Oh, welcome, friend. Thank you for the hydrate. See, we don't ban people for hydrating, Sage. Make pay attention. Yeah, ban Sage. That's right. Ban Sage. Just dodge. Yeah, just dodge. Zartes, I hope your stream went well today, friend. Time it will do you. Take that, haha. Why is it like I'm looking at this? It looks like they put a line through the emote where he's giving us the finger, but I think the emote with a gun, there's too much white in it. You can't see the line. It didn't work. Yeti. He's angry. Oh no, he's angry. Don't worry. At least we're not turning you into kimchi. It did a bit of doodling, finish Animorphs 1. Oh, good work, good work. How is Wilds going? I see you playing Monster Hunter Wilds every so often. Yeah, I've got no idea what. Apparently Valana knows more about Animorphs than I do. I'm thinking about getting him back into Wilds. But I'm also kind of like, was it going to be Wilds or Dark Tide? But I play Space Marines already. I think I might get back into Wilds. I just need more space on my damn computer. Right now I've got Gears of War 4 installed. I won't be doing Wilds until I have that cleared out. So once we finish that, I can uninstall it and swap in Wilds. Having 1 terabyte is kind of rough these days. It's been a fun time. You finally made it to Rarity 8 equipment. Ah, good work, friend. Good work. You feel like an actual hunter now? You're in rank rate high is high rank now, right? So you've getting towards the end of it. Gears of War games. Yeah, well, Queen Fruit bullied me into playing one. She said, you got to play Gears of War. I said, okay, well, which one did you like the most? And she said number 4. So I agreed to do number 4. So we're collaborating on Thursdays right now. We started last Thursday. And we got somewhat through the game. And then I got chainsawed in 2. And that was like, well, it's the end of the night. So we decided to put the game on hold then. Having 3 terabytes isn't much better. Oh, no. I think I can do a lot with 2 terabytes. I can have 4 or 5 games installed with like maybe up to 8. And then also have a little bit of space for videos. I've got like 10 videos I have to edit. All just backlogged from streams. You don't think you ever got to Gears of War 4? Well, apparently you're missing out on the best one. But I've also been told number 5 is trash, so don't worry about that one if you care to. I have like a 24 terabyte NAS, and before I started streaming, I had like roughly 12 terabytes of free space. I looked at it last night. I'm down to like 8.7 terabytes. I have to contact someone and start investing money into hard drives. I also have my manager has talked to me about getting me a new laptop for work. Now I shouldn't, but I use my personal computer for work because The laptops I get from work aren't powerful enough to run the applications work wants me to run. So instead of just suffering on like the like incredibly lame and slow and grindy equipment they give me, I just installed up my own computer. With my manager's awareness and consent. I would definitely argue against anyone doing that, including myself. So the university's taking a stronger stance on procedure and security, and so my manager said, "Look, I'll get you a stronger laptop, and then we'll do things sort of by the book kind of idea." So that's going to happen soon, which means I'm going to get a tiny bit of space back on my hard drive. Not a lot. The software doesn't take up much space. Most of the files are stored in the cloud, so that's kind of a thing. Blowing through that memory. Yeah, it's tons of space. It's tons of storage. Each of the video files is at least now restricted to like, what is it? Like 20 or 30? What is it now? I'm going to go look it up. Just a quick look-see into my video folder. Yeah, about 30 to 40 gigs of space, right? Each video is like 30 to 40 gigs of space too. So I only have, like, it's crazy. If I clear out the like extra games and video, I have like 40% of my of my storage free, but that fills up so fast. You really just like, I don't know. I would love to have 3 terabytes. I think I'd be quite fine with that. Lots of spare space in my case. I was just about to say I did. I'm not sure where that sentence context is coming from. Anyhow, welcome in everybody. I'm going to, I think, continue my reading here, and yeah, we're getting close to the end of the book here too. So find out what's happening. Welcome in everyone who just suddenly started talking in chat. That's very nice. Let's see. The tradition of the law was clearly losing its force. I cannot pursue this disagreeable subject. Okay. I wonder if he's the because he would have had to start shooting people. So, hopefully that's the disagreeable part. My dog man imperceptibly slipped back to the dog again. Day by day he became dumb, quadrupedal, hairy. I scarcely noticed the transition from the companion on my right hand to the lurking dog at my side. As the carelessness and disorganization increased from day to day, the lane of dwelling places, at no time very sweet, became so loathsome that I left it, and going across the island, made myself a hovel of boughs among the black ruins of Moreau's enclosure. Some memory of pain, I found, still made that place the safest from the beast folk. It would be impossible to detail every step of the lapsing of these monsters, to tell how day by day the human semblance left them, how they gave up bandages and wrappings, abandoned the last every stitch of clothing, how the hair began to spread over the exposed limbs, how their foreheads fell away and their faces projected, how the quasi-human intimacy I had permitted myself with some of them in the first month of my loneliness became a shuddering horror to recall. The change was slow and inevitable. For them and for me, it came without any definite shock. I still went among them in safety, because no jolt in the downward glide had released the increasing charge of explosive animalism that ousted the human day by day. But I began to fear that soon, now that shock must come. I don't see why there would be shock. Like, their brain is still accustomed to your presence, so you are still a part of the world, and part of a safe part of the world, and perhaps even an authoritative figure. My Saint Bernard brute followed me to the enclosure every night. His vigilance enabled me to sleep at times in something like peace. Oh, Valana. He totally fucked some of the animal women. That's gonna get me banned. All right, that's cool. Thank you. Let's see. Every night, and his vigilance enabled me to sleep at times something like peace. Yeah, you know what it is, right? At some point in time, right, they transition from mostly human through the furry stage back into animals, right? And we get back to the question: where do you draw the line? I should stop talking about this. It's crazy. The little pink sloth thing became shy and left me, to crawl back to its natural life once more among the tree branches. We were in just the state of equilibrium that would remain one of those happy family cages which animal tamers exhibit, if the tamer were to leave it forever. Of course, these creatures did not decline into such beasts as the reader has seen in zoological gardens, into ordinary bears, wolves, tigers, oxen, swine, and apes. There was still something strange about each. In each Moreau had blended this animal with that. One perhaps was ursine chiefly, another feline chiefly, another bovine chiefly, but each was tainted with other creatures, a kind of generalized animalism appearing through the specific dispositions. And the dwindling shreds of the humanity still startled me every now and then, a momentary recrudescence of speech perhaps, an unexpected dexterity of the forefeet, a pitiful attempt to walk erect. I too must have undergone strange changes. My clothes hung about me as yellow rags, through whose rents I showed the tanned skin. My hair grew long and became matted together. I am told that even now my eyes have a strange brightness and a swift alertness of movement. At first, I spent the daylight hours on the southward beach watching for a ship, hoping and praying for a ship. I counted on the, oh dear, this name again, Impeka Kuana. Sure, returning as the year wore on, but she never came. Yeah, given the last exchange at the beginning of the book, I doubt she'll ever come by here again. 5 times I saw sails, and thrice smoke, but nothing ever touched the island. I always had a bonfire ready, but no doubt the volcanic reputation of the island was taken to account for that. It was only about September or October that I began to think of making a raft. By that time my arm had healed, and both my hands were at my service again. At first I found my helplessness appalling. I had never done any carpentry or such like work in my life, and I spent day after day in experimental chopping and binding among the trees. I had no ropes, and could hit on nothing wherewith to make ropes. None of the abundant creepers seemed limber or strong enough, and with all my litter of scientific education, I could not devise any way of making them so. I spent more than a fortnight grubbing among the black ruins of the enclosure and on the beach where the boats had been burnt, looking for nails and other stray pieces of metal that might prove of service. Now and then some beast creature would watch me, and go leaping off when I called to it. There came a season of thunderstorms and heavy rain, which greatly retarded my work, but at last the raft was completed. I was delighted with it, but with a certain lack of practical sense which has always been my bane, I had made it a mile or more from the sea, and before I had dragged it down to the beach, the thing had fallen to pieces. Perhaps it is as well that I was saved from launching it, but at the time my misery at my failure was so acute that for some days I simply moped on the beach, and stared at the water and thought of death. I did not, however, mean to die, and an incident occurred that warned me unmistakably of the folly of letting the days pass so, for each fresh day was fraught with increasing danger from the beast people. I was lying in the shade of the enclosure wall, staring out to sea, when I was startled by something cold touching the skin of my heel, and starting round, found the little pink sloth creature blinking into my face. He had long since lost speech and active movement, and the lank hair of the little brute grew thicker every day and his stumpy claws more askew. He made a moaning noise, and when he saw he had attracted my attention, went a little way towards the bushes and looked back at me. At first I did not understand, but presently it occurred to me that he wished me to follow him, and this I did at last, slowly, for the day was hot. When we reached the trees, he clambered into them, for he could travel better among their swinging creepers than on the ground, and suddenly, in a trampled space, I came upon a ghastly group. My Saint Bernard creature lay on the ground, dead, and near his body crouched the hyena swine, gripping the quivering flesh with his misshapen claws, gnawing at it, and snarling with delight. As I approached, the monster lifted its glaring eyes to mine. Its lips went trembling back from its red-stained teeth, and it growled menacingly. It was not afraid, and not ashamed. The last vestige of the human taint had vanished. I advanced a step farther, stopped, and pulled out my revolver. At last I had him face to face. The brute made no sign of retreat, but its ears went back, its hair bristled, and its body crouched together. I aimed between the eyes and fired. As I did so, the thing rose straight up in a leap, and I was knocked over like a 9-pin. It clutched at me with its crippled hand and struck me in the face. Its spring carried it over me. I fell under the hind part of its body, but luckily I had hit it as I meant, and it had died even as it leapt. I crawled out from under its unclean weight and stood up, trembling, staring at its quivering body. That danger at least was over, but this, I knew, was only the first of the series of relapses that must come. I burnt both of the bodies on a pyre of brushwood, but after that I saw that unless I left the island, my death was only a question of time. The beast people by that time had, with 1 or 2 exceptions, left the ravine and made themselves lairs according to their taste among the thickets of the island. Few prowled by day, most of them slept, and the island might have seemed deserted to a newcomer. But at night the air was hideous with their calls and howling. I had half a mind to make a massacre of them, to build traps or fight them with my knife. Had I possessed sufficient cartridges, I should not have hesitated to begin the killing. I thought you had a whole bunch of those. There could now be scarcely a score of the creatures of the dangerous carnivores. The braver of these were already dead. After the death of this poor dog of mine, my last friend, I too adopted some extent of practice of slumbering in the daytime in order to be on my guard at night. I rebuilt my den in the walls of the enclosure with such a narrow opening that anything attempting to enter must necessarily make a considerable noise. The creatures had lost the art of fire too, and recovered their fear of it. I turned once more, almost passionately now, to hammering together stakes and branches to form a raft for my escape. I found 1,000 difficulties. I am an extremely unhandy man. My schooling was over before the days of sludge. I don't know how to pronounce that. That's definitely not how you pronounce that. But most of the requirements of a raft I met at last in some clumsy, circuitous way or another, and this time I took care of the strength. The only insurmountable obstacle that I had no vessel to contain the water I should need if I floated forth upon these untraveled seas. I would have tried pottery, but the island contained no clay. I used to go moping about the island, trying with all my might to solve this one last difficulty. Sometimes I would give way to wild outbursts of rage and hack and splinter some unlucky tree in my intolerable vexation, but I could think of nothing. And then came a day, a wonderful day, which I spent in ecstasy. I saw a sail to the southwest, a small sail like that of a little schooner, and forthwith I lit a great pile of brushwood and stood by it in the heat of the midday sun, watching. All day I watched that sail, eating and drinking nothing, so that my head reeled, and the beasts came and glared at me, and seemed to wonder, and went away. It was still distant when the night came, and swallowed it up. And all night I toiled to keep my blaze bright and high, and the eyes of the beast shone out of the darkness, marveling. In the dawn the sail was nearer, and I saw it was the dirty lug sail of a small boat, but it sailed strangely. My eyes were weary with watching, and I peered and could not believe them. 2 men were in the boat, sitting low down, one by the bow and the other at the rudder. The head was not kept to the wind, it yawed and fell away. As the day grew brighter, I began waving the last rag of my jacket to them. But they did not notice me, and sat still facing each other. I went to the lowest point of the low headland and gesticulated and shouted. There was no response, and the boat kept on her aimless course, making slowly, very slowly for the bay. Suddenly a great white bird flew up out of the boat, and neither of the men stirred nor noticed it. It circled round, and then came sweeping overhead with its strong wings outspread. Then I stopped shouting, and sat down on the headland and rested my chin on my hands and stared. Slowly, slowly, the boat drove past towards the west. I would have swum out to it, but something, a cold, vague fear, kept me back. In the afternoon, the tide stranded the boat and left it 100 yards or so to the westward of the ruins of the enclosure. The men in it were dead, had been dead for so long that they fell to pieces when I tilted the boat on its side and dragged them out. One had a shock of red hair, like the captain of the Epikakuahana. Kuanha, yes, right. And a dirty white cape lay at the bottom of the boat. That's what we call karma, I suppose. Assuming it was the captain. As I stood beside the boat, 3 of the beasts came slinking out of the bushes and sniffing towards me. One of my spasms of disgust came upon me. I thrust the little boat down the beach and clambered aboard her. 2 of the brutes were wolf beasts and came forward with quivering nostrils and glittering eyes. The third was the horrible nondescript of bear and bull. When I saw them approaching, those wretched remains, heard them snarling at one another, and caught the gleam of their teeth, a frantic horror succeeded my repulsion. I turned my back upon them, struck the lug, and began paddling out to sea. I could not bring myself to look behind me. I lay, however, between the reef and the island that night, and the next morning went round to the stream and filled the empty keg aboard with water. Then, with such patience as I could command, I collected a quantity of fruit, and waylaid and killed 2 rabbits with my last 3 cartridges. While I was doing this, I left the boat moored to an inward projection of the reef for fear of the beast people. Chapter 22, The Man Alone. In the evening I started, drove out to the sea before a gentle wind from the southwest, slowly, steadily, and the island grew smaller and smaller, and the land spire of smoke dwindled to a finer and finer line against the hot sunset. The ocean rose up around me, hiding that low, dark patch from my eyes. The daylight and the trailing glory of the sun, sent streaming out of the sky, was drawn aside like some luminous curtain. And at last I looked into the blue gulf of immensity which the sunshine hides, and saw the floating hosts of the stars. The sea was silent, the sky was silent. I alone with the night and silence. So I drifted for 3 days, eating and drinking sparingly, and meditating upon all that had happened to me, not desiring very greatly then to see men again. One unclean rag was about me, my hair a black tangle. No doubt my discoverers thought me a madman. It is strange, but I felt no desire to return to mankind. I was only glad to be quit of the foulness of the beast people. And on the 3rd day, I was picked up by a brig from Apia to San Francisco. Neither the captain nor mate would believe my story. Judging that solitude and danger had made me mad, and fearing their opinion might be that of others, I refrained from telling my adventure further, and professed to recall nothing that had happened to me between the loss of the Lady Vane and the time when I was picked up again, the space of a year. I had to act with the utmost circumspection to save myself from the suspicion of insanity. My memory of the law, of 2 dead sailors, of the ambuscades of the darkness, and the body in the canebrake haunted me. And unnatural as it seems, with my return to mankind came instead of that confidence and sympathy I had expected, a strange enhancement of the uncertainty and dread I had experienced during my stay upon the island. No one would believe me. I was almost as queer to men as I had been to the beast people. I may have caught something of the natural wildness of my companions. They say that terror is a disease, and anyhow, I can witness that for several years now a restless fear has dwelt in my mind. Such a restless fear as a half-tamed lion cub may feel. My trouble took the strangest form. I could not persuade myself that the men and women I met were not also another beast people, animals half wrought into the outward image of human souls, and that they would presently begin to revert, to show first this bestial mark and then that. But I have confided my case to a strangely able man, a man who had known Moreau and seen half to credit my story, a mental specialist. And he has helped me mightily, though I do not expect that the terror of the island will ever altogether leave me. At most times it lies far in the back of my mind, a mere distant cloud, a memory, and a faint distrust. But there are times when the little cloud spreads until it obscures the whole sky. Then I look about me at my fellow men, and I go in fear. I see faces keen and bright, others dull or dangerous, others unsteady, insincere. None that have the calm authority of a reasonable soul. I feel as though the animal was surging up through them, that presently the degradation of the islanders will be played over again on a larger scale. I know this is an illusion, that these seeming men and women about me are indeed men and women forever, perfectly reasonable creatures, full of human desires and tender solicitude, emancipated from instinct, and the slaves of no fantastic law. Yeah, this is PTSD. And also kind of seeing that perhaps humans are also animals, and he can recognize the animal inside the human, in a sense. Beings altogether different from the beast folk. Yet I shrink from them, from their curious glances, their inquiries and assistance, and long to be away from them and alone. For that reason I live near the broad free downland, and can escape thither when this shadow is over my soul. And very sweet is the empty downland then, under the wind-swept sky. When I lived in London, the horror was well nigh insupportable. I could not get away from men. Their voices came through windows, locked doors were flimsy safeguards. I would go out into the streets and fight with my delusion, and prowling women would mew after me, furtive, craving men glanced jealously at me. Weary, pale workers go coughing by me with tired eyes and eager paces, like wounded deer, dripping blood. Old people, bent and dull, pass murmuring to themselves, and all unheeding a ragged tale of gibbering children. Then I would turn aside into some chapel, and even there such was my disturbance. It seemed that the preacher gibbered big thinks, even as the ape-man had done, or into some library, and there intent faces over the books seemed but patient creatures waiting for prey. Particularly nauseous were the blank, expressionless faces of people in trains and omnibuses. They seemed no more my fellow creatures than dead bodies would be, and so that I did not dare to travel unless I was assured of being alone. And even it seemed that I too was not a reasonable creature, but only an animal tormented with some strange disorder in its brain, sent it to wander alone, like a sheep stricken with gid. This is a mood, however, that comes to me now. I thank God more rarely. I have withdrawn myself from the confusion of cities and multitudes, and spend my days surrounded by wise books, bright windows in this life of ours, lit by the shining souls of men. I see few strangers, and have but a small household. My days I devote to reading and to experiments in chemistry, and I spend many of the clear nights in the study of astronomy. There is, though I do not know how there is or why there is, a sense of infinite peace and protection in the glittering hosts of heaven. There it must be, I think, in the vast and eternal laws of matter, and not in the daily cares and sins and troubles of men, that I hope whatever is more than animal within us must find its solace and its hope. I hope, or I could not live. And so in hope and solitude, my story ends. Edward Prendick. Here we go. End of the story. A horrific story of most terrible horribleness. So we start off in the island at the beginning, thinking that this horrific Dr. Moreau, this terrible monster of a man, has taken humans and animals and fused them together. At least that was my first initial impression, and tortured them for days, and later on we understand weeks at a time, in order to fuse them. And we also then realize that no, they're just animals that have been somehow given the characteristics of humans, including in many cases an enhanced ability to think, talk, communicate, and go about their daily business. And as they disappointed the doctor, the god figure of the story, if you will, he sent them out into the world to just live out their tortured existence, being denied their nature by the law of the land, by his law. He had a lot of copium going on. He had a lot of self-justification. What is it, like the anti-villain? The villain who thinks they're justified, or in this case, just had no care or consideration for ethics. He denied ethics. He cast it aside as sort of perhaps frivolous. He decided for everyone that pain was trivial. It was merely just part of existence, perhaps. Some cases, pain was not even necessary. It didn't even happen, but then kind of ignores the fact that he inflicted a lot of pain. What did I call that? Neutral evil? Cast them out of the garden. Yeah, he literally cast them. No, it's not even a garden. It's like he cast them out of hell into a limbo, into a wild place. Neutral evil. I'd call him chaotic evil. Like there is a darkness in there that just has no regard for any social norms, or there's no empathy. So there's a lot of, he's definitely a psychopath, right? There's definite psychopathy there. He perhaps a bit of narcissism. He is self-justified. He believes what he's doing is fine, right? That's so terrible. But he's justified in his own brain. He has no he understands that other people have problems, and he understands what those problems are enough to be able to, in his brain, refute them. At the end, of course, he died through circumstances, he grew the puma into a being that was stronger than his the thing that tied it down. What was it called? Whatever it was, the chains that bound it. It broke its bondage, ran away. He chased it, and they killed each other. And that started sort of the downward spiral. God has been killed. God has been slain. Therefore, the tenets of God are not reliable. They are now called into question. And without Moreau around without the House of Pain to maintain the effectiveness of the vivisection magic, if you will, to maintain their humanistic infections, they start to revert to animals, which has different consequences. Some of the animals are quite amenable to humans. Some of them will just leave you alone, and others are quite dangerous. And so they dealt with that. And then, of course, after a year of this, he gets back to humanity. Of course, you're gonna have PTSD. That's some fucked up shit that he just went through. Holy cow. Brutal. Very nasty business. And yeah, now he's going around thinking of all these humans who, for all he knows, are just animals that were turned into humans. And I guess there's a bit of a, hey, do we have an animal in all of us, rather than, hey, we are also our own form of animal. There is not an animal within us. We are the animal known as human, so there's no need for us to revert. I don't think that would be a strong idea when this is written. And there were a lot of ideas around what is a human, right? The idea that humans are animals was probably very new. I don't remember when Charles Darwin sort of started proving that shit otherwise, compared to when this is written. So, but the book did refer to like animals and lower animals. So it probably understands that, yeah, humans are animals, but hey, we're higher animals. People aren't really acknowledging that we are just another type of animal. That's kind of an interesting thought to me. It's like, yeah, what animal would you revert to? Well, you're a human. So you would revert to a human, I guess. You can start mixing in like sort of animalistic spiritualities, like First Nation religions and stuff. You can start talking about like, but perhaps you have links to certain types of animals or share characteristics in your spirit or something. Don't take my word for that. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, go look that up for yourself. I am pulling threads of memories together based on nothing I particularly remember. So just bear that in mind. No disrespect if you happen to be part of any of those communities or belief systems. Yeah, but yeah, interesting horror book. I'm a little tired tonight, so I was kind of pushing through this a little bit, but yeah, I think we're done there. We're finished. It fit nicely into 2 streams. I know we finished a little early last time, so I wanted to hit the halfway point of the book, so we do half this time, and it just kind of just fit kind of really nicely. So that's pretty cool. Next time we read, we're going to start the book called White Fang by Jack London. So, more animal stuff. That is a little under twice. Well, this book was 24,000 words. That book's 72,000 words. So it's going to be a few more streams. So that one will last a hot minute. We are racing against the clock, so we're going to find someone to raid into and call it a night. Yeah, if I can find my browsers and stuff. Let's see. Awesome. Very awesome. Thank you everyone for following, for coming along and listening to my story. We'll try to find someone nice, calm, and chill for us to sort of bounce into. Your ad is about to start. Let's hit the snooze button one more time. Finding someone is always an exercise in backflipping. None of these are categorically similar. Can we find a new person? Oh, here's the person. Can I have to unmute my tab? That's a little collaboration. We might go there. We might go there. Let me take a poke. Let me take a quick poke around. I really wish writing and reading were separate categories. That would be nice. Yeah, next book is White Fang. That's right. I think that person is writing. I would like to find a person who's reading. That would be nice. Okay, we're going to do this person. We're going to do the first person. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Here we go.